Chapter 412. Please wait a moment. This is a misunderstanding. Xiao Buyu's body flashed as he faced the green-clothed girl. His expression had changed from careless to serious. He was bewildered as he said, "Young lady, please calm down. This is probably a misunderstanding. Please allow this old man to explain it to you." Misunderstanding? This joke isn't funny at all. If we sisters were really ordinary young misses from prestigious clans, then even if we didn't lose our lives at the hands of this idiot before us, we would probably be forcefully taken away by you, humiliated, and ravaged as you please. Is this how the people of the Silver Blizzard City behave? Explain. Would you have explained if we hadn't been sisters? Is there even a need to explain? The green-clothed girl's eyes turned cold. Lang Lang looked at Xiao Buyu. Her murderous aura hadn't disappeared. Xiao Buyu was no match for Xiao Han. The green-clothed girl's aura had risen again, and her murderous aura had reached his head. But he wasn't completely powerless to resist. However, the pressure was too great. In fact, he felt overwhelmed. However, the ignorant are fearless. Xiao Han had felt the girl's frightening aura. However, he had Xiao Buyu to back him up. So, he hadn't realized the danger in front of him. How could he have known that Xiao Buyu was also in a difficult situation at this moment? Xiao Buyu was like a great wall to him. Xiao Buyu was doing his utmost to resist the surging and frightening murderous aura. But, he suddenly broke into a cold sweat. He felt as if he had been targeted by an incomparably venomous viper. Moreover, this viper was far superior to him in terms of speed, agility, and strength. Xiao Buyu's entire body felt ice-cold at this moment. A chill ran down his spine from the top of his skull all the way to the chrysanthemum behind him. That was because he had finally figured out who this green-clothed girl was. He would have been the closest person to the great master level if he hadn't figured it out. Feng Wu and Han are young and inexperienced. They were just speaking thoughtlessly. They didn't mean any harm. I ask that you don't take offense. I'll make them apologize to you. Xiao Buyu wanted to slap his own mouth. He was so regretful that his intestines had turned green. Had he really gone senile? The familiar aura, the familiar clothes, and the cold and evil gaze. Other than the face, wasn't this the Snake King of the Tianfa forest? However, since the other party was unwilling to reveal his true identity, it meant that he was intentionally concealing his tracks. If he were to rashly reveal his identity, he would truly be asking for trouble. That would truly be a huge offense. As for the girl in white, she was Snake King's elder sister, a girl with the surname Mei. Good heavens. Let me die. He had actually plotted to instruct his own grandson to take Snake King's elder sister home as his wife, or even as a concubine. This was simply a brain cramp, water in his head. Even if he was a real retard, he couldn't be this retarded. If this were to spread out, wouldn't it be a huge joke? The Snake King's respect for her indicated that this Snake King's elder sister was a little weaker than Venerable Mei. But, she couldn't be much weaker. After all, beasts respect the strong. So, you're nothing if you don't have strength. Moreover, she's surnamed Mei. Could it be that she's Venerable Mei's younger sister? It wasn't surprising that he would think that way. After all, the Venerable Mei had always been a man in the eyes of the world. Moreover, he was an old man. But the white-clothed girl in front of him wasn't only a peerless beauty of peerless elegance. Moreover, she was very young and beautiful. Xiao Buyu didn't even glance at the approaching Jun Wui's army. In fact, he wasn't even in the mood to pay attention to them. In fact, he didn't even hear them. In fact, he had turned a deaf ear to them. He was dumbfounded. Oh my God! What have I done? I had just instructed my grandson to take liberties with Venerable Mei's younger sister, and he had even called the Snake King a lowly servant. Xiao Buyu was on the verge of collapsing. Motherfew ****. I can't be this unlucky, can I? Why did I listen to that bastard Xiao Han's nonsense? Isn't it the same as courting death to go along with him? Xiao Buyu couldn't help but fiercely glare at Xiao Han as he thought of this. Mother Fu asterisk cur. Why would we have stopped if you hadn't gone crazy? Why would we have run into these two fiends if we hadn't stopped? Why would we have molested them if we hadn't run into them? And, why would the Snake King fly into a rage if you hadn't called him a lowly servant? Our Xiao family has already determined that this mysterious expert is our enemy. So, we can't even compare to him. Venerable Mei doesn't even need to personally deal with the Xian beasts of Tian Fa. In fact, the Silver Blizzard City will become the next Shuihan Manor. So, there's no room for discussion. You're a jinx. You're a troublemaker. You've made the Jun family an enemy. And, you've provoked that super expert because of you. And, you've provoked the Xian beasts of Tian Fa. The Silver Blizzard City. You have the guts to take liberties with my elder sister. And, you even scolded me. Humph. You're very bold. You're worthy of being called a disciple of a famous family. The Qian Sun Serpent Queen's cold gaze swept over the 17 people in front of her. Then, Langlang said, "This matter isn't over. I'll go to the Silver Blizzard City later. I'll look for that old bastard Han Feng Shui, and ask him for an explanation. Is this how he teaches his subordinates?" The Snake King's voice was clearly audible amidst the muffled sounds of the approaching army's hooves. However, only Xiao Buyu could hear it. The other people from the Silver Blizzard City still didn't know that they had provoked a huge problem. However, everyone could see that Xiao Buyu was acting very submissive. In fact, he was acting very cautiously and apologetically. It could be assumed that these two women weren't ordinary people. Xiao Fengwu's eyes lit up. Wouldn't my status in the Silver Blizzard City soar if this white-clothed woman turns out to be a member of a hidden family if I marry her? I'm afraid that my plan of holding two beauties on my left and right will come to nothing if she's a descendant of a hidden family. But, giving up the little princess won't be a problem if it's worth it. In fact, I can even consider marrying into the Silver Blizzard City. After all, it's better to have such a beautiful woman as my companion than the unruly little princess. It had to be said that a person's thoughts were endless. Xiao Fengwu was still thinking about this issue at such a time. In fact, he was wishfully dreaming of holding two beauties on his right and left. In fact, he was even thinking of marrying into the Silver Blizzard City's family. Although Xiao Han was at the beginning of the Sky Xian realm, he had relied on the help of his elders to open up his meridians. He had also consumed a large amount of elixirs to accumulate his strength. Very few of his achievements had been achieved through his own bitter cultivation. Therefore, although he could be considered as a genuine Sky Xian expert, he could not be mentioned in the same breath as those Sky Xian experts who had achieved their breakthrough through their own cultivation. Mu Shuitong could vaguely sense some clues about this. But, he was still unaware of it. In fact, he believed that his grandfather was an indestructible backer. Therefore, Xiao Han's eyes hadn't been attracted by the green-clothed woman. He was completely unaware of the trouble he had provoked. His eyes were fixed on the dust rising from the south. His blood-red eyes were blazing with a crazed desire to fight. Jun Wui, you've finally come. I've been waiting for you for a long time. Today will be the day you die. Xiao Buyu was the only one who understood the situation. He was left dumbstruck. He was burning with impatience. But, he couldn't say anything to warn him. There was still room for adjustment in the current situation. But, there would be no other way out if he were to reveal the other party's identity. Fight? Can we fight? Our strength is very strong. In fact, it's enough to show disdain for our generation. But, it depends on who we're up against. The Snake King is at least as strong as the cold-blooded Master Lei Wu Bei. So, we may not be able to take him down. Moreover, there's that mysterious and unpredictable Mei girl who seems to be even stronger than the Snake King. Moreover, we can't beat them. But, would we dare to fight them even if we could? We can only lose if we fight them. And, we're bound to provoke the Tian Fa forest if we suffer a loss. Moreover, the Silver Blizzard City's strength wouldn't be enough in the face of a more formidable force. It was true that the Silver Blizzard City was at the apex of the world. But the Tian Fa Forest was the most dangerous place in the world. It was on par with the Three Holy Lands. Xiao Buyu was one of the top experts of the Silver Blizzard City. He was the second master of the Xiao family. He was the closest to the great master level. However, he was at a complete loss. Do you think these people are worth getting your hands dirty? Just go and look for Han Feng Shui to punish him for the crime of not disciplining him properly. The white-clothed girl who hadn't spoken until now finally spoke. But her words made Xiao Buyu and the rest of the 17 people so angry that they almost fainted. Ah, elder sister is right. This little sister will follow your instructions. The Qian Sun Serpent Queen nodded respectfully. Then, she turned to Xiao Buyu and asked, "Tell me, why are you here?" He. I won't hide it from you. It's a personal grudge between the Xiao family and the Jun family. Han has vowed to fight a decisive battle with Jun Wui in the name of a man. Xiao Buyu had wanted to say, "I won't hide it from the Snake King." But, he remembered that the opposite party was in disguise. So, he quickly changed his words. Xiao Buyu didn't explain the matter in detail. So, he simply explained it. His eyes were fixed on the approaching army in the distance. His complexion was heavy, and his tone was somewhat listless. How could he be in the mood to let Xiao Han challenge Jun Wui? The dangerous situation had been resolved because of the white-clothed girl's words. But, this matter was far from over in the long run. She had said go and look for Han Feng Shui to punish him for the crime of not disciplining him properly. This meant that the Silver Blizzard City had provoked an unparalleled enemy. This is like a fart that smashed your heels off. It's like drinking a mouthful of cold water to stuff your front teeth. A person's luck can be this bad. It's a wonder in the world. He wished that he could grow a pair of wings on his back, and fly back to the Silver Blizzard City as soon as possible. Then, he would have arranged a contingency plan. The Snake King is already an unrivaled fiend. And, that Mei girl must be even more dreadful from her tone. This is extremely bad luck. Chapter 413. It must be known that once an army of several 100,000 was deployed in battle, the commander's tent would be located right in the middle of the battlefield. A distance of several tens of thousands of soldiers would be extremely tiring even if they were to rush there, not to mention continuously killing their way through. Even if they were to charge halfway to the commander's tent, how strong would they need to be to do so? Even if a Supreme Being expert could fly for a period of time in the sky, they would definitely not be able to fly for more than 10 miles. Such a long distance, they would definitely land to take a breather. However, once they landed, they would at least be surrounded for a while before they could fly again. Even if they were to reach the commander's tent, they would still need to take a few breaths, which would consume a lot of their strength. However, as long as there was a disturbance, the commander's tent could be moved in time. Even if it was Solitary Eagle, it would be extremely difficult for him to assassinate Jun Wui in the midst of an army of 20,000 soldiers. Unless it was someone like Jun Dashao who possessed the yin-yang escape technique, he would be able to take the head of the commander in the midst of an army of 10,000. However, Jun Wui clearly remembered that there were only a few people at the level of Tian Xian who appeared in front of him. Furthermore, they suddenly appeared in front of him. There were no signs at all, and he was caught unprepared. The security of the commander's tent was so tight that even a mosquito would not be able to fly in. How did they kill their way in? If there were no traitors, Jun Wui would not believe it even if he was beaten to death. However, if there were traitors, then where did they come from? Who would be able to arrange for such a traitor? Jun Wui had long had suspicions in his heart, and even had a direction of suspicion. However, that direction of suspicion was too frightening. Once it was triggered, the consequences would be relatively huge. Therefore, this suspicion needed to be confirmed, and he needed the most concrete evidence to prove it. This was the biggest difference between Jun Wui and Jun Moxie. Jun Wui was a true descendant of the Jun family. He was the same as Grandpa June. For the sake of the country, for the sake of the family, for the sake of the common people, he could delay or even give up on his vengeance. However, if the same thing were to happen to June Moxie, he wouldn't care so much. He would investigate whoever he suspected and even go to their door to extort a confession. So what if you have a strong background? My fists are the strongest. If you hurt my finger, I'll destroy your entire family. As for the impact of this incident and how many innocent people will die, it's none of my business. If you want to blame someone, blame the culprit. Don't tell me you want to blame me, the victim. Hee, Jun Wui, are you puzzled? You can continue to be puzzled and depressed. Xiao Han laughed maniacally. Let me tell you, of course there is an inside story, but I won't tell you. Never ever. Go to hell with this question. Ha ha ha. My guess was right. There really is more to it than meets the eye. Xiao Han, because of these words of yours, I will fight with you today. I will first collect some interest from your Silver Blizzard City. Not for anything else, but for my big brother, my second brother. Jun Wui's eyes were filled with murderous intent. A trace of pain flashed in the depths of his eyes. His heart ached. Big brother. Second brother, forgive third brother. Today, I can wash away the shame of my two brothers. Jun Wui's eyes sharpened like an arrow. He stretched out his hand and said, sword. Jun Moxie was already prepared. With a flick of his wrist, a long green sword appeared in his hand. He handed it over to Jun Wui. Jun Wui stretched out his hand to catch it. Unexpectedly, the weight of the sword was unexpectedly heavy. Even with his middle-level Tian Xian's tyrannical strength, he almost couldn't catch it due to his carelessness. His wrist sank, and he hurriedly activated his Xian Qi to stop the sword from falling. This sword looked ordinary, but its weight was more than 3 times that of an ordinary long sword. In fact, this sword wasn't the second batch of treasured swords that Jun Mo Xia had refined. In fact, the young Master Jun had picked up 15 swords before he had come here. And he had refined them into one sword in a moment of panic. Because, if he were to give Jun Wui that sword that was made from hundreds of weapons, Jun Wui's strength would naturally be able to bear the weight. However, because those swords were almost 10 times heavier than an ordinary sword, even if he could bear it, it would be difficult for him to wield it freely. The third master would need some time to get used to it before he could use it against an enemy. So, it would only produce the opposite effect if he were to give it to him now. Therefore, Jun Moxie had rushed to get this sword as fast as he could. It was only 3 times the weight. But, Jun Wui's strength was enough to handle it in an instant. In terms of quality, this hastily refined sword couldn't be compared to Jun Mo Xia's previous swords. But, it was still a divine weapon if one were to compare it to an ordinary weapon. Jun Wui looked at Jun Moxie in astonishment. Jun Moxie smiled. But, he didn't say anything. Jun Wui casually brandished the sword. Suddenly, a green light flashed in the darkening sky. It looked like a bolt of green lightning, and drew a moving line of color. Good sword. It's a very good sword. Jun Wui blurted out. Xiao Buyu and the others also had dignified expressions on their faces. This sword was clearly a divine weapon. Elder sister, I'm afraid that there's something strange about this sword. The sword's light and the cloud pattern are reflecting each other. I'm afraid that its quality isn't far from Lei Wu Bei's saber. The green-clothed Snake King moved closer to the white-clothed girl's ear and whispered. But the white-clothed girl didn't respond after she spoke. It seemed as if she hadn't heard her. She couldn't help but feel strange. She had thought that the white-clothed girl was attracted by the sword. But, she looked up, and realized that her elder sister's beautiful eyes were fixedly staring in a certain direction. She wasn't even blinking. The Qian Sun Serpent Queen followed her gaze, and saw a tall and handsome young man standing there. He had a tall stature, and his eyes were sparkling. He was standing in front of thousands of soldiers and horses, but he still looked very lonely. It seemed as if he was the only person in the world. The Qian Sun Serpent Queen felt a kind of heartfelt loneliness and bitterness as she looked at him. It seemed as if she could feel the ancient loneliness in that young man's heart. And she couldn't help but feel a pang of pain in her heart. It's June Moxie. The Snake King still remembered this young man. But what puzzled her from the bottom of her heart was why her elder sister would keep staring at him. That young man can be said to be a genius among geniuses from a human's point of view. He already has an extraordinary cultivation at such a young age. But he still hasn't entered the eyes of the Beast Kings of Tian Fa. The Qian Sun Serpent Queen was puzzled. So, she turned her head to look again. She saw that her elder sister's hand was still holding the teacup. But her knuckles had already turned white. And the look in her eyes was fluctuating. Why? The Snake King's eyesight allowed him to see that the teacup in her elder sister's hand was still intact. In fact, it could even hold a full cup of tea. However, the teacup itself had already turned into a pile of dust. In fact, her elder sister had used a supreme mysterious technique to maintain its shape. Her true form would be revealed once her Xian Qi was withdrawn, and she would turn into a pile of flying ash. Elder sister wouldn't have been this angry even if she had met her mortal enemy in the past. And she wouldn't have behaved so abnormally either. So, why is she acting like this today? Unfortunately, time didn't allow the Snake King to think further. Because the two people in the field had already started fighting. And that was because Jun Wui had said, "Good sword. It's a really good sword." Xiao Han's face suddenly turned red. That was because he had heard Jun Wui say, "So cheap. So cheap." Therefore, Xiao Han's hair stood up in anger. Many people in the Silver Blizzard City had been talking about him behind his back. There was only one word to describe him: cheap. Even the elders in the family would often say, "Why are you so despicable?" when they saw him like this. That woman obviously doesn't like you. She's never had any interest in you. She already has someone she loves. So, why do you have to seek death? She's the daughter of the city lord. Do you really think that a child's marriage has such a strong binding force? You actually want to take revenge on her. Her family is ruined, and you still won't let it go. Do you really care about the title of the city lord's son-in-law? You're degrading others, degrading yourself. If that's not cheap, then what is? Xiao Han, why are you so cheap? Why are you so cheap? I'm cheap. I'm fucking cheap. Xiao Han's eyes turned red as he rushed forward. His sword flashed with a bright light. Jun Wui had just pushed his wheelchair out of the army's formation, and hadn't even stabilized his footing when he had attacked. This kind of behavior, this kind of character, if it's not cheap, then what is it? It's really hard to find a more suitable adjective. Jun Wui understood this man's character too well. He was already prepared for this. He quickly raised his sword. Dang! The two swords collided. Under the impact of the two swords, the wheelchair flew back like an arrow, while Jun Wui's body was already in the air. In a flash, he was already 50 feet away. Then, he stabbed the ground with the tip of his sword and flipped another 50 feet. Jun Wui landed and sat on the ground. He looked at Xiao Han and said, "Come here and fight. Don't hurt my brother." Xiao Han felt a burst of heartache. When the two swords collided, not only did his wrist hurt, but even his sword had a grain-sized hole. One must know that Xiao Han's sword had been with him for 20 years. It was made with 10,000-year-old Xian jade as its main material. It was a godly weapon unique to the Silver Blizzard City. He had inherited it from the elders of his clan during his coming-of-age ceremony. With this sword in hand, it complemented the snow wind Xian technique, adding a bit of coldness to it. Moreover, it was made of a unique material and was extremely sharp. It was truly a top-notch divine weapon. Xiao Han had used this weapon to gain a lot of advantages in his previous battles. Even some people who were stronger than him in terms of Xian cultivation had suffered greatly because their weapons were inferior to his. But he didn't expect the tables to turn. Today, the first thing to be damaged was his own sword. Looking at Jun Wui's sword, it was as clear as water. It was not damaged in the slightest. Could it be that the sword in his hand is also a rare treasure? Thinking of this, Xiao Han's heart skipped a beat. Moreover, from this sword, he could feel that Jun Wui's Xian Qi was much stronger than his own. How is this possible? Even with the strength of Tian Xian and his godly weapon, he couldn't gain the upper hand. But looking at Jun Wui sitting on the ground, Xiao Han's confidence rose. No matter how strong you are in terms of Xian Qi, you are still a cripple. Don't tell me I can't even defeat a cripple. Xiao Han's lips curled into a cruel smile. He let out a shout of joy. His sword turned into a bright silver light and pierced towards Jun Wui. Today is September 18th, a national humiliation. He wanted to do something, but after thinking about it, he realized that he couldn't do anything. It was a feeling of helplessness. Hot blood surged in my chest, a spear in my hand, but I could only call my friends and get drunk. Which brother or sister has the same feeling as me? Chapter 4:14. Suddenly, the silver light transformed into a rain of petals that filled the sky. It gradually formed an arc, and then exploded with a loud bang. It looked like a firework had been set off, and the brilliant petals of the sword surrounded Jun Wui's body. This move of Xiao Han's could be described as a deluge of heavenly flowers. It dazzled the eyes of the enemy, and made it impossible for the enemy to defend against it. To put it bluntly, he was attacking in circles. Every substantial attack was aimed at Jun Wui's back. To put it bluntly, this bastard was relying on his legs to bully the enemy. How could a man be so shameless? Sure enough, he was invincible when he was shameless. Xiao Han's despicable fighting style had undoubtedly proved this point. But no matter how shameless Xiao Han was, Jun Wui was indeed in a precarious situation because of Xiao Han's despicable attacks. He was in a sorry state. Many people couldn't bear to watch Xiao Han's fighting style. Among them were the 7 swords of the Silver City. What's going on? His legs aren't nimble to begin with. How can he still fight? How can he be so shameless? What's wrong with the Silver City? The third elder of the 7 swords frowned, and his face was full of dissatisfaction. Jun Wui's lower limbs are crippled, but he's not crippled. He has been concentrating on cultivating his Xian Qi for the past 10 years, and his progress has not been astonishing. He's already at the intermediate level of Tian Xian, and his Xian Qi cultivation is indeed higher than Xiao Han's. Moreover, the sword in his hand is superior to the Xian Jade sword. Xiao Han's method may not be honorable, but it's the most advantageous and correct method. Do you want to abandon your own strength and fight him? Isn't that courting death? The 6th elder Lengleng said, fighting a life-or-death battle with a mortal enemy naturally requires extreme measures. What's the point of saving face at this point? Although Xiao Han's fighting style was despicable, it was still a life-or-death battle. It could be said that it was brilliant and brilliant. Therefore, whether it was the Silver City or the Tian Xiang army, everyone was watching the fight with rapt attention. There were few exceptions. However, although there were few exceptions, it did not mean that there were none. For example, the little princess of the Silver Blizzard City, Han Yen Meng, was pouting as she leaned on Mu Shuetong's body. Her face was full of grievance. She wasn't even interested in watching the battle that was taking place in front of her. Mu Shuetong's complexion didn't look good, but he was worried about Jun Wui in his heart. So, he moved closer to Han Yen Meng's ear and whispered, "Girl, why do you feel wronged? If you don't agree to this marriage, isn't this a great opportunity? Little stupid." Han Yen Meng's tender body couldn't help but tremble. Her eyes were shining, and her face was shining. She jumped up with a "wow" sound, and hugged Mu Shuetong's arm. Jun Wui's body was weak, and it was difficult for him to move. On the other hand, Xiao Han had gained an overwhelming advantage in the battle. In fact, the third master of the Silver Blizzard City would have killed Jun Wui a long time ago if it weren't for the fact that he was afraid of the third master's divine weapon. But the dust would have settled once the advantage was turned into a victory. The people of the Silver Blizzard City were looking at Xiao Han, who had gained the upper hand in the battle. Their expressions were strange and complicated. They couldn't tell whether they were excited or disappointed, whether they were happy or sad. The white-clothed girl finally moved her eyes away from Jun Moxie's body, and looked at the battle. One glance. Only one glance. She sighed and said, "The Silver Blizzard City's Shao clan is finished." The Qian Sun Serpent Queen frowned and asked, "I also feel that there's something strange about this battle. But, I can't tell what's so strange about it. Jun Wui's strength is undoubtedly superior to that Shao clan's, but, his legs," the white-clothed girl replied in a low voice, "Jun Wui's legs should have been healed by now. His disability is nothing more than a disguise. From the beginning to the end, the disadvantage we're in has been deliberately created by him. To be honest, between the two of them, Jun Wui is superior in terms of Xian Qi cultivation and weapons. But, Jun Wui must have been disabled for many years. So, he's relatively unfamiliar with martial arts. But the martial arts of the Silver Blizzard City are quite impressive. They're far superior to Jun Wui's. And, this is also the only area where Jun Wui is inferior to that Shao clan's. It wouldn't be difficult for Jun Wui to win if he wanted to. He could have easily knocked down his opponent's sword. But, Jun Wui's true intention seems to be to take his opponent's life. There's not much of a difference in their strength. Moreover, there are many experts from the Silver Blizzard City watching the battle. So, Jun Wui will inevitably be stopped by the Silver Blizzard City if he can't kill that Shao clan's Xian Qi. Therefore, he has set up this trap. On the one hand, he wants to consume his opponent's Xian Qi as much as possible. On the other hand, he wants to create an opportunity to kill his opponent in one blow. Once this opportunity is created, he won't allow that Shao clan's Xian Qi to survive. So, that's how it is, the green-clothed girl, Snake King, suddenly realized. The whistling sound of the sword tearing through the air resounded. Xiao Han's long hair fluttered wildly in the wind. His face was full of cruel pleasure. Xiao Han's condition had been elevated to its peak after this period of warm-up. He had gathered all his strength into his sword. So, he could use his killer move at any time. Cold wind and snow, a motionless sword. The temperature in the field seemed to have suddenly dropped. It seemed as if a bone-chilling wind had started to howl in the middle of winter. Jun Wui, you're dead meat. So what if your Xian Qi is higher than mine? You're a cripple. A cripple. You'll be a cripple even in death. Ha ha ha. Xiao Han laughed crazily. Hexagonal snowflakes suddenly appeared in the bone-chilling wind along with his laughter. They flickered with a silvery light, and fluttered down in a dreamlike manner. The sky seemed to be filled with murderous sword-like snowflakes in a split second. They crazily poured down towards Jun Wui's body, who was sitting on the ground. Jun Wui was sitting on the ground. He couldn't avoid it. Xiao Buyu sighed. He was hesitant. Should I step forward and stop him? Or should I let nature take its course? Solitary Eagle and Jun Moxie were watching the fight from afar. Suddenly, a strange smile appeared on their faces. It was a mocking smile. It was a happy smile. However, no one had noticed it since their minds were focused on the two men fighting in the field. Xiao Han's heart was brimming with the joy of killing his great enemy. His long-cherished wish had finally been fulfilled today. I've finally used my blood to wash away my shame today. So what if you're loyal and unwavering, Yao? The person you love has already died by my sword. No one else can have you even if I can't have you. Xiao Han's face contorted. He brandished his sword like a madman. He attacked with all his strength, and slashed at Jun Wui. Jun Wui didn't seem to have any other way. He drew a circle with his sword, and was sent flying in the air with a clanged sound. Xiao Han laughed like a madman. He didn't relax, and continued to thrust his sword forward. Suddenly, Jun Wui's calm face broke into a smile. In fact, he seemed very happy and proud of himself. In fact, he even winked at Xiao Han. In fact, he made a grimace that no one could have imagined. Almost everyone cried out in alarm at this moment. It wasn't because of the Blood General's grimace. It was because the scene before their eyes was too strange. It was too unbelievable. That was because Jun Wui suddenly jumped up and stood upright. His footsteps were exceptionally agile and vigorous. Jun Wui made an extremely simple movement the moment the sword approached his body. He ferociously kicked Xiao Han's belly. Xiao Han's attack wasn't vicious. He had concentrated all his energy on the third master's upper body. So, he hadn't thought about the lower half of his body. Why would he consider attacking a disabled man with his legs? That's something only a fool would do. Xiao Han had become even more relaxed after Jun Wui's sword had left his hand. In fact, he had even removed the guard on his upper body. In fact, he had assumed the attitude of a victor. His heart was filled with the desire to wantonly abuse and toy with his opponent. Jun Wui will always be trampled under my feet. I'll use whatever means I have. So, I can wantonly humiliate you, toy with you, and wreak havoc on you as long as I win. But Xiao Han didn't expect that the disabled man in front of him would suddenly kick him. And it was such a heavy kick. Why did Jun Wui kick me? Isn't he a disabled man? How can a disabled man kick someone? And he kicked me. This kick was very solid, very solid. Xiao Han's body was sent flying like a kite with a broken string. The sword light that had yet to reach Xiao Han's body was completely scattered as he was kicked away. Blood spurted out from Xiao Han's mouth and nose. However, his eyes were still filled with disbelief. Even his mouth was wide open in shock. How? Wasn't he a disabled man for more than 10 years? Why did he kick me? Why? Xiao Han was still in a state of confusion, anger, and surprise even when he landed. Jun Wui didn't slow down. His body shot forward like an arrow as he chased after Xiao Han's retreating body. Then, he ruthlessly kicked the man's chest. Xiao Han roared in pain as one of his ribs broke with a "kacha" sound. His eyes were filled with confusion and panic. The rare Silver City sword flew out of his hand, and fell to some unknown place. However, Jun Wui wasn't going to give him the time to think. Jun Wui's fists had already ferociously pounded on Xiao Han's temples. Jun Wui's eyes suddenly turned red the moment his fists came in contact with Xiao Han's facial muscles. Was this what it felt like to take revenge with one's own hands and punch into flesh? 10 years of hatred. 10 years of hatred. 10 years of life and death separation. 10 years of grief and indignation. 10 years of suffering and separation. 10 years of being crippled. Ah! Jun Wui screamed crazily. He punched and kicked wildly. Tears of regret flowed down his face. Big brother. Sister-in-law. I have taken revenge for you. Second brother. This little brother has wronged you. My two nephews, do you see this? Do you see this? Yao. My Yao. This lowly ruffian in front of me is the culprit. Jun Wui was shedding tears as he roared silently. Then, he ferociously punched Xiao Han's dantian. A crackling sound was heard, and a wisp of cold chi dispersed. It turned out that Xiao Han's dantian had been destroyed. Xiao Han's body flew out with a "so" sound. At this moment, he seemed to not feel any pain in his body at all. His eyes, which were filled with fear and confusion, were still wide open in shock. In midair, he only yelled out, "Impossible! This is impossible! How is this possible? This can't be real! It can't be real!" Jun Wui didn't give him time to breathe. He closed in again. Chapter 4:15. Jun Woo-yi was venting out all the grief and indignation that he had accumulated over the past 10 years. He punched out again and again. The sound of his punches was like the most beautiful music in the world to Jun Woo-yi's ears. Just like how Xiao Han did not want to kill Jun Woo-yi with his sword and wanted to torture him slowly, Jun Woo-yi would never have punched Xiao Han's head off. Because that would have been too easy on him. 10 years of hatred, the death of his eldest brother, the death of his 2 young nephews, the death of his eldest sister-in-law, 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 the decline of the Jun family. This hatred was like a mountain, like an ocean. All of this hatred was caused by this person. How could Xiao Han's death be enough to offset this hatred? Wouldn't that be too easy on him? Jun Woo-yi had never hated anyone as much as he hated Xiao Han. Even if it was his enemy, even if it was those crazy human traffickers, evil tyrants, government officials, it was enough for Third Master to kill them with one sword. But for Xiao Han, Jun Woo-yi felt that it was not enough, far from enough. If it was possible, Jun Woo-yi did not want to kill him. Instead, he would slowly torture him for the rest of his life. Every day, he would be tortured to the 18th level of hell. Even so, Third Master still felt that it was not enough. A long sword fell from the sky with a dazzling cold light. The sword edge cut through the sky and pierced into a big rock on the side of the road. With a cha sound, the sword went straight into the rock, leaving only the sword hilt outside. It was Jun Woo-yi's sword. What a sharp divine weapon! Such a natural fall, piercing into the hard rock like tofu, all the way to the hilt. What kind of divine weapon is this? Almost all the warriors looked at this long sword with blazing sparks in their eyes. Even the solitary eagle, who never used a sword, was no exception. It had to be said that Jun Woo-yi's leg had already recovered. This fact had thoroughly shocked everyone in the Silver Blizzard City. Before they could recover from the shock, Xiao Han was already in the middle of a storm of beatings. How dare you! At this moment, the onlookers had already recovered from their shock. Xiao Buyu shouted angrily and flew out. His hand was like a giant axe as he chopped towards Jun Woo-yi. Xiao Buyu would have been heartbroken and furious if Jun Woo-yi had killed Xiao Han. But, he wouldn't have been in a position to do so. After all, the two of them had been engaged in a duel to the death. However, Jun Woo-yi had the upper hand at the moment. So, he wasn't happy to end Xiao Han's life. Instead, he was deliberately torturing Xiao Han. And, that was tantamount to losing the Silver Blizzard City's face. Old man. You're really shameless. A silhouette suddenly appeared in front of Xiao Buyu with an angry shout. Then, a sword flashed with a cold light, and pierced towards his throat like a bolt of lightning. The sword hadn't arrived yet, but the cold aura of the sword had already caused goosebumps to appear on Xiao Buyu's throat. Then, a murderous aura enveloped him. It seemed as if it could cut through the heavens and the earth. Divine weapon. Another divine weapon. Xiao Buyu was gobsmacked. How can the Jun family have so many divine weapons? Shen Xian's body was as hard as steel, and he wasn't afraid of ordinary weapons. But, Xiao Buyu suddenly felt as if his life was as fragile as tofu in front of this divine sword. This was the prelude to death. Xiao Buyu didn't dare to be negligent. He quickly changed his direction, and moved horizontally like a bolt of lightning. He left a long afterimage in his wake, and soared into the sky. He felt that he was already far away from the attacker's attack range. Then, he finally had the leisure to see who this person was. However, Xiao Buyu almost somersaulted down from the sky when he saw this person. He rubbed his eyes, and looked again. But, it was still the same. He couldn't help but gape like his grandson. In fact, he couldn't close his mouth for a long time. How is this possible? A young and arrogant figure was floating in front of him. He held a sword that was overflowing with a cold light. His face had a disdainful sneer on it. Jun Moxie. The sword in Jun Moxie's hand was a divine sword. The blood of yellow flame. Jun Dashao was very proud of himself. The blood of Yellow Flame's first life will be taken by Shenxian as a sacrifice to the Divine Sword's first blood. But the name of the blood of Yellow Flame won't be in vain. Shao family's old man, do you still have any shame? This is a one-on-one fight between men. And, you're actually getting involved? What kind of strong man are you, Shenxian? Jun Moxie sneered, your grandson said that it's a fight in the name of a man. Dare I ask the Silver Blizzard City's second master, what does it mean to fight in the name of a man in the Silver Blizzard City? Do you want to win or lose? Are you planning to gang up on me? Xiao Buyu's white beard fluttered in the wind as he coldly snorted, you've got a sharp tongue, boy. He spread his hands, and a sharp cold wind rushed towards Jun Moxie. Xiao Buyu calmed down after his initial shock. Jun Moxie is a heaven-warping genius. But, he's only 17 or 18 years old. How powerful can he be? So what if his sword is sharp? I'll beat this arrogant boy to the ground. Then, this sword will be mine. The importance of that divine weapon had surpassed Xiao Han's life at this moment. Jun Moxie sneered. His body flickered in and out of existence. Then, he pointed his sword to the east and struck to the west. He was facing the Silver Blizzard City's 4th level Shenxian Xiao Buyu. The sword light scattered like a meteor shower. It was gorgeous and resplendent. Xiao Buyu had reached the 4th level of the Shenxian realm. So, he was close to becoming a great master. But, he still couldn't enter Jun Dashao's eyes. Dashao had the blood of Yellow Flame in his hand. So, his strength had doubled. Moreover, Dashao's strength couldn't be compared to that of Tian Xian's. Therefore, Dashao wasn't at a disadvantage even though he was fighting Xiao Buyu on his own. In fact, he was even taking the initiative. The curtain of night had finally descended upon the earth. An all-out battle was about to begin. On the other side, Solitary Eagle's figure was like an eagle soaring through the sky. He was flying at lightning speed, and was blocking the 7 swords of the Silver Blizzard City. The 7 swords of the Silver Blizzard City hadn't dared to disperse the might of a great master. Each of them was at the peak of Tian Xian's strength. So, they couldn't have been compared to Solitary Eagle. So, they had only been able to contend with Solitary Eagle by relying on the combined strength of the 7 of them. If any one of them were to make a mistake, then the other 6 would probably lose their lives to the Solitary Falcon in less than a cup of tea's time. The battle had reached a stalemate for the time being. The other 5 elders were about to join in the battle when they suddenly felt an indescribable pressure on their bodies. It was as if an inexplicable murderous intention had locked onto them. This murderous intention was bitingly cold. It was vast and mighty. It seemed as if the entire world was brimming with an extremely terrifying murderous aura. However, the strangest thing was that no one knew where this murderous intention had come from. Who had released it? How had it locked onto them? The green-clothed girl was watching the show in high spirits. So, it obviously wasn't her. The white-clothed girl had her back to the 5 elders. She was still leisurely sipping her tea. So, it wasn't her either. So, who was it? Just who possessed such terrifying strength? But, no matter who it was, this person's strength had definitely surpassed that of an ordinary supreme martial artist. In fact, he had even reached the level of supreme martial artist Zhu Tian. The 5 elders were only at the ordinary level of Shenxian. In the face of such a sharp and fierce aura, they were all dumbstruck. Every single one of them had mustered every ounce of strength in their bodies. They did their best to resist the onslaught of this murderous intention. For a moment, they couldn't even move a finger, let alone help Xiao Han or the 7 swords. They didn't even dare to move. Because everyone had a clear feeling that it would be fine if they didn't make a move. But, if they made a move, all 5 of them would die. If they didn't act rashly now, only Xiao Han would die. But, if they acted rashly, all of them would be wiped out. This wasn't a threat. It was a fact. That enormous aura had clearly told them the truth of this matter. The green-clothed girl, Snake King, widened her eyes in shock. She was the only one who knew where this murderous intention was coming from. There were countless people in the world. But the Snake King had only seen one person who could control such an illusory aura with such ease. That person is my elder sister. What's going on? My elder sister obviously hates June Moxie. But why is she helping him now? This is a very difficult matter to understand. The Snake King was extremely intelligent. But she couldn't figure out what was going on even if she racked her brains. June Moxie was fighting Xiao Buyu. Da Xiao's agility was marvelous and agile. He was flying in the air. He was sometimes in front, sometimes behind, sometimes to the left, and sometimes to the right. Xiao Buyu had a gloomy expression on his face. His palms whistled as he faced the attack. This was beyond everyone's expectations at this moment. The rumored debauchee of the June family's young master was not only able to fight one-on-one with Xiao Buyu, who was a spirit Xian expert of the Silver Blizzard City. Moreover, he was even able to take 70% of the offense. Xiao Buyu's face was calm and collected. But he was extremely shocked in his heart. Xiao Buyu had never experienced such a fight in his entire life. Even when he had sparred with the old city's lord, Han Feng Shui, he had never felt so restrained. In fact, he had never felt so dangerous. Could it be that my life and death are no longer under my control? This young man is giving me such a strong sense of danger. This young man's agility is extremely strange. I can't even guess where he's going to appear next. Moreover, he never gives me an opportunity to block his moves. His figure appears in a certain position for a very short period of time. Moreover, it's always in the most difficult position for me to exert my strength. It's the most unbearable position. And he would always counterattack with a sword move that he had never seen before. This young man's sword moves could be said to be marvelous to the extreme. In fact, they were far beyond the scope of Xiao Buyu's imagination. Each move was incomparably swift and fierce. And each style was filled with an awe-inspiring murderous intention. But he had never seen it before. It was like an antelope hanging its horns. But each attack was aimed at his weak point. The Silver Blizzard City had many exquisite moves under the heavens. So, most of the Silver Blizzard City's martial arts books had records of them. In fact, they even had corresponding methods to break them. However, this young man had already changed his sword moves a dozen times in a row. And he couldn't even recognize a single one of them. So, it was impossible to break them. Chapter 4:16. Today's second update has been delivered. The third update is being revised, and the fourth update is being diligently made. Moreover, the sharpness of the sword in this youngster's hand had reached a breathtaking level. Xiao Buyu had never seen such a divine sword in his life. It seemed as if it could be split open with just a touch. It didn't matter whether it was made of stone, steel, or Xian Qi. Under the sharpness of this long sword, the fourth-grade immortal Xian Qi that was slashed out consecutively was actually split apart from the middle. Xiao Buyu had no choice but to take the most stable defensive position. But he had gradually begun to feel powerless even if it was just a simple defensive position. The series of events that he had witnessed today had been unimaginable. In fact, it had been a fantastic story under the heavens. In fact, he would have felt very satisfied if this had happened to someone else. In fact, he would have exclaimed in admiration again and again. In fact, he would have been so excited that it seemed as if he had reached orgasm. But if it were to happen to him, then it would truly become a complete tragedy. Xiao Buyu wanted to cry, but he had no tears to shed. This feeling was like a living person fighting with a ghost. Even if this living person had the ability of a tyrant and had the strength to move mountains, the other party had form but no substance. No matter how much strength you had, it was useless. You couldn't affect the other party at all. So what if you had great strength? He knew that this ghost was only a ghost. But this ghost still had the power to kill him. Xiao Buyu was very sad. He was extremely regretful at this time. Wouldn't it have been better if I had returned with the Silver Blizzard City's orders? How troublesome would that have been? What a pity. What a pity. This old man is too late for regrets. Xiao Buyu was still persisting in his tactics. He was trying his best to hold on until Jun Moxie was exhausted. He believed that he couldn't attack Jun Moxie even if he was a heaven-warping genius. And his agility was superb. However, Jun Moxie was still very young. So, how deep could his Xian Qi be? Xiao Buyu had determined that Jun Moxie's strength had reached the initial stages of the heaven level after their previous exchange. However, this level of cultivation at such a young age was truly shocking. But even this level of Xian Qi also depended on who it was being compared to. Jun Mo Xia was a level 4 master of the Shen Xian realm. He possessed hundreds of years of exquisite Xian Qi, and was only one step away from the great master level. Moreover, if one were to compare offense and defense, the defensive side would consume a lot of mental energy, but the energy consumption would be far less than that of the attacker. This was especially true when the Jun family's little thief was attacking like a violent storm, which consumed the most Xian Qi. The principle of martial arts was that one couldn't be too strong for long, and that one couldn't guard too much. He believed that as long as he fought steadily and didn't reveal any flaws, the final chance of victory would be his. Even if he took 10,000 steps back, he would be able to exhaust his opponent to death. Xiao Buyu's plan could be said to be flawless under normal circumstances. In fact, it could be said that his calculations were extremely wise. This kind of tactic was applicable everywhere. He believed that basically no one in the world could exceed this scope. However, it didn't mean that no one could. For example, his strategy of delaying Jun Moxie had been a big mistake. Because Jun Dashao was a complete freak. And this freak wasn't afraid of any kind of exhaustion. Dashao had the upper hand, but he still had some misgivings in his heart. Xiao Buyu was a level 4 master of the Shen Xian realm. Perhaps he wasn't as good as Solitary Eagle. But there wasn't much of a gap between them in terms of Xian Qi. Xiao Buyu would be at a disadvantage if he were to go all out. And the gap between his Xian Qi and Xiao Buyu's Xian Qi was too big. So, it didn't matter how sharp or valiant Xiao Buyu's moves were. In fact, he might even inflict serious injuries on Dashao. But it wouldn't be fatal. After all, how could Jun Moxie choose to go all out against an old fox like Shen Xian? Jun Dashao was like the rising sun. He hadn't lived long enough. Wouldn't it be too much of a loss to risk his life against an old freak who was almost 100 years old? It was a pity that Xiao Buyu also cherished his life. In fact, he cherished his life far more than Dashao had imagined. Moreover, he still wanted to maintain Shen Xian's reputation. So, he had put on airs even though he was facing a powerful enemy like Jun Moxie. He would rather fall into a disadvantageous position. In fact, he had been so passive that he hadn't even drawn his sword. After all, Shen Xian was a level 4 master. He was a level 4 master. And he had been famous for more than 60 years. So, it wouldn't be justifiable for him to use his sword against a 16 or 17-year-old boy. However, Xiao Buyu had never thought that he would make such a foolproof choice. But he hadn't expected that he wouldn't be able to exhaust his opponent to death. Instead, he was the one who couldn't afford to exhaust his opponent. Jun Moxie's imposing manner was like a rainbow as the battle went on for a long time. His offensive had become increasingly vigorous. But he had also begun to admire Xiao Buyu. His offensive had been tight and urgent. Moreover, every move he had used hadn't belonged to this world. So, he had believed that any one of his moves would have been able to cause a great shock. However, the second master of the Xiao family, Xiao Buyu, was worthy of the reputation of the first generation of Shen Xian. He was an expert who was closest to becoming a great master. Xiao Buyu had cut a sorry figure under his violent offensive. In fact, he had even been forced into a fluster. he had still been able to rely on his profound martial skills and valiant fighting wisdom to hold out for so long. Xiao Buyu's Xian Qi couldn't be mentioned in the same breath as that of that damned Bailey Xiongfeng. Both of them were called Shenxian in name. But Bailey Xiongfeng was at most a level 1 master of Shenxian. And Xiao Buyu was a level 4 master of Shenxian. So, there was a huge gap between them. Moreover, Jun Imo Xie had countless opportunities to stab Xiao Buyu with his sword. But, Xiao Buyu would have launched a crazy counterattack if he had stabbed him. And, that counterattack would have been enough to kill him. Jun Imo Xie had seized the heaven and earth's good fortune. So, an attack that would have been fatal to an ordinary person wouldn't necessarily be able to take his life. But, his opponent's Shenxian Qi wasn't something that his body could withstand. The gains wouldn't make up for the losses. Therefore, Jun Imo Xie could only continue to fight. Jun Moxie had the art of opening the heavens to protect his body. And, he had the Hong Jun Pagoda to back him up. Jun Moxie's spiritual power could be said to be endless. In fact, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was inexhaustible. Xiao Buyu's defensive line was shrinking more and more. He was blindly defending himself to death. And Da Xiao's spirit was trembling with excitement. So, he became more and more courageous as he fought. And, his attacks became more and more ferocious. His sword moves were like fireworks in the night sky. His sword light illuminated the 9 heavens in the middle of the night. Xiao Buyu became more and more cautious as he fought. He was afraid that he would be careless and reveal a flaw. Jun Moxie had become even more vigorous and lively as a result. He had become free and at ease. In fact, he had even assumed a few postures that made him look even more valiant and formidable looking. Jun Wui had already finished his fight on the other side. He had retrieved his sword, and was standing with his hands crossed behind his back. Xiao Han was curled up on the ground like a lump of mud. It was hard to tell whether he was dead or alive. On the other side, Solitary Eagle was fighting the 7 swords of the Silver City on his own. However, the Snake King and the white-clothed girl's gazes were focused on the battle between Jun Moxie and Xiao Buyu. It wasn't because it was very intense. Rather, it was because Jun Moxie's sword moves were simply too marvelous. Every move and every style had left the two women dazzled. It seemed like a very ordinary and simple move. But they would discover that it was extremely profound and mysterious if they were to carefully analyze it. It could be fake or real. It could be advanced or retreated. It could be used to attack or defend. And the coordination between his sword moves and his footwork was even more breathtaking. It would have been very difficult to believe that such a marvelous move existed in this world if they hadn't seen it with their own eyes. They could naturally see the true might of Jun Moxie's sword moves with their outstanding strength. Jun Moxie was only at the level of Tian Xian. But, he had been able to use these moves to fight a level 4 Shenxian to a draw. In fact, he had even taken the majority of the offensive. There were some additional factors involved. But, most of it was the truth. Just think about it. What would the might of such moves be like if the Snake King and the white-clothed girl were to use them? Pfft! The Snake King laughed. That was because Jun Moxie had taken the time to spread his legs and raise his buttocks towards Xiao Buyu. He wouldn't be able to reach the ground. But, this action was very unsightly. In fact, it was full of flaws. So, he couldn't help but laugh as he said, "If you want to fight, then fight. But, why do you have to make such a posture? Isn't it courting death for an insignificant Tian Xian to face a level 4 Shenxian? You're wrong." The white-clothed girl calmly looked at the fight between the two. Then, she slowly said, "Xiao Buyu is a level 4 expert of Shenxian. His Xian Qi is very profound. But, that Jun brat has a marvelous method to quickly replenish his Xian Qi. But, his fighting strength is only at the level of Tian Xian's. So, it would be difficult to determine a winner or loser even if the fight were to drag on for another day and night. So, it would be very difficult to exhaust much of Xiao Buyu's strength. Therefore, Jun Mo Xia must successfully provoke Xiao Bu Yu's anger as he attacks. Then, he can take advantage of the situation. It was true that Jun Mo Xia had the upper hand in this situation. But, he would eventually run out of moves if he were to continue this intense and ferocious offensive for such a long time. And, that would be the time when a fatal flaw would appear. Xiao Bu Yu can endure it once or twice. But, he only needs one opportunity. And, he only needs one opportunity to strike a fatal blow with his Shenxian's strength. And, he'll win in one strike. But, Jun Moxi's strange movements can't provoke Xiao Bu Yu's anger. Xiao Bu Yu is a veteran of the world. He has hundreds of years of experience. So, how can he get angry so easily? The Snake King was somewhat baffled. Of course, Xiao Bu Yu is very experienced. So, he won't be angered by his opponent's tricks. But, have you noticed that Jun Mo Xia always makes an inexplicable and insulting move whenever Xiao Bu Yu gets flustered? And, Xiao Bu Yu gets flustered at that time. Jun Mo Xia's agility can be said to be marvelous. So, Xiao Bu Yu will find it difficult to grasp the best opportunity to attack even if there's a flaw in his defense. But, Xiao Bu Yu won't stop thinking about it. So, this will disrupt Xiao Bu Yu's thinking about Jun Moxi's new move. And, Xiao Bu Yu will still be unable to break it the next time Jun Moxi uses the same move. So, he will be flustered once again. And, that's where Jun Moxi's opportunity lies. And, it's also an excellent way to protect himself. I have to say that this idea is very brilliant. Chapter 4:17. The third chapter has been delivered. The white-clothed girl smiled and said, I can conclude that Jun Moxi is hinting to Xiao Bu Yu that he will fight with him for a long time. The more Jun Mo Xia acted in this manner, the more Xiao Bu Yu would fight steadily and surely. He wouldn't dare to risk a counterattack. He would only continue to exhaust Jun Mo Xia's basic strategy. However, it seems that Jun Moxi won't die from exhaustion. But, this gives Xiao Bu Yu some hope. So, he won't make a desperate attack out of desperation. Therefore, this battle will be a stalemate for some time. Elder sister, didn't you just say that Jun Moxi intends to provoke Xiao Bu Yu's anger? The Qian Sun Serpent Queen was even more puzzled. Aren't you contradicting yourself, elder sister? He had hinted at Xiao Bu Yu to give him a clear reminder. So, how could Xiao Bu Yu get angry? How can he reveal any flaws when his mind is stable? Jun Mo Xia will make his move when Xiao Bu Yu has completely calmed down. And, he will have full confidence in himself. Only then can he provoke Xiao Bu Yu into a violent rage. And, that's the only time he can create a real variable. The white-clothed girl smiled and said, I think you haven't noticed. Jun Moxi's eyes have stealthily glanced at the battle between the 7 swords and the solitary eagle at least 3 times. Is he planning to mount a sneak attack on the 7 swords? Is he planning to provoke Xiao Bu Yu's anger? The Snake King's eyes lit up as he said, it's a brilliant plan if that's the case. Xiao Bu Yu won't be able to keep his cool if Jun Moxi manages to cripple any one of the 7 swords. The only thing I can't figure out is that Jun Moxi's movements are very secretive. But, what kind of person is Xiao Bu Yu? No matter what, he was still a famous expert of his generation, a 4th-level spirit Xian expert. In a battle, his eyes and ears would definitely be alert. Even if Jun Mo Xia's movements were concealed, how could he hide it from him? How could he let Jun Moxi have his way? If Jun Moxi succeeded, the alliance of the 7 swords would immediately collapse, and the solitary eagle would be able to kill the 7 swords in a very short time. There would be no turning back for the Silver City's defeat. So, Xiao Bu Yu must have taken precautions. But, it seems that Jun Moxi's plan is wrong. The white-clothed girl seemed to have a clear understanding of the entire situation. But, she revealed a trace of doubt for the first time. Hearing this, the Snake King was also puzzled. Suddenly, the situation changed once more. Jun Moxie used the same technique that he had used twice before. His technique was just as marvelous as before. His agility also accelerated, and formed a circle of 10 or more afterimages of Jun Moxie in front of Xiao Buyu. It was as if dozens of Jun Moxie were attacking at the same time. The piercingly cold light of the longsword seemed to have merged into one. Xiao Buyu sneered. "Junior, have you finally run out of tricks? You've used the same technique more than 3 times. You've dared to use the same technique over and over again in front of a level 4 expert like Shen Xian. You've used it more skillfully this time, but you can't change the fact that you've used it 3 times. Now, it's time for your retribution. This old man will let you know the consequences of overestimating your own abilities." Xiao Buyu laughed as he suddenly slanted his palms to attack. His palms surged up like a mountain in an instant, and fiercely attacked the afterimages of Jun Moxie's sword lights on his left. This was where Jun Moxie had landed. And this was the starting point of his sword. There was no mistake about it. Xiao Buyu's judgment was correct. Jun Moxie would have landed there if he had used this technique. And he would have attacked there. Jun Moxie's tragedy would have come to an end then. It was a pity that Jun Moxie hadn't used this technique in its entirety. But he would have been able to predict the future. Jun Moxie had only used half of his sword technique when Xiao Buyu had taken the initiative. And that was the essence of the martial art of crossing the river before it. No one could have changed the sword technique's momentum under such circumstances. Not even an expert like Shen Xian or a great master would have been able to do so. However, Jun Moxie's art of unlocking the heaven's fortune had turned the impossible into the possible. Jun Mo Xie's sword was about to collide with Xiao Buyu's attack when a sudden change occurred. The momentum of Jun Mo Xie's sword didn't stop for even a moment. Instead, it turned into a long rainbow. Xiao Buyu was only separated by a hair's breadth. The tip of the sword issued a humming sound, and suddenly converged into a brilliant ball of light. Then, it exploded, and transformed into a long silver dragon mid-flight. The sword light looked like a rolling cylinder as it traversed a distance of 150 feet, and went straight towards the 7 swords of the Silver City. Man and sword become one. Jun Moxie had used his most powerful technique at such an impossible time. This sword technique was beyond everyone's expectations. Moreover, the 7 swords of the Silver City were in a critical situation at this moment. The 7 of them were already in a precarious situation against the solitary falcon, one of the 8 great masters. So, they were barely able to support themselves. Jun Mo Xie's sudden appearance on his flying sword had made them even more vulnerable. And the situation had turned extremely bad for the 7 swords. A camel's back could be crushed by a single straw. But how could it be fine when it was suddenly smashed by something that weighed hundreds or even thousands of pounds? Xiao Buyu knew that he had fallen into a trap. So, he shouted coldly. He didn't have the time to think about how the Jun family's little thief had changed his sword technique midway. His priority was to save the 7 swords. So, he couldn't help but roar in anger as he chased after Xiao Buyu at full speed. Then, he raised his Xian Qi, and channeled all of his Xian Qi into his palms. He shot forward like a rocket. His speed was several times faster than his normal speed. Xiao Buyu was very angry at this moment. I'd been fooled by this brat in such a situation. Therefore, he had put all of his strength into this attack. He had concentrated all of his strength into this attack. Jun Moxie's move would have succeeded, and the 7 swords would have suffered some damage. But Jun Moxie would have still died under his next move. Xiao Buyu was very sure of this. Therefore, he wasn't very anxious even though he was angry. That was because the 7 swords of the Silver City only belonged to the side of the city lord, and they were people with the surname Han. They belonged to the Silver Blizzard City, but they weren't surnamed Xiao. Therefore, Xiao Buyu wouldn't necessarily feel sad even if Jun Moxie's attack was successful. In fact, he might even kill 1 or 2 of them. He only wanted to kill this brat who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Therefore, Xiao Buyu wasn't furious even though he was angry. That cylindrical sword light didn't stop there. It arrived behind the 7 swords like a bolt of lightning. Xiao Buyu's rapidly flying body was behind Jun Moxi's back. He was less than 15 meters away from Jun Moxi's back. For a spirit Xian expert, this was a distance that could be easily reached. In fact, Xiao Buyu's sleeves were issuing a sharp whistling sound as he flew. His entire body had turned into a fuzzy gray shadow. It was evident that his speed had increased to the extreme. Da Xiao had spent a lot of effort to create this situation. But, it didn't seem very advantageous now. Solitary Eagle's brows wrinkled. He was very dissatisfied with Jun Moxi's arrival. I have the absolute advantage. But, you've suddenly attacked me. Are you here to support me? Or are you here to cause trouble? I would have been able to defeat the 7 swords if you could have held Xiao Buyu back for a while. But, you've suddenly attacked me. But, you've put yourself in danger even if you can speed up my victory. Isn't this not worth it? As for the 7 swords, their cultivations were 1 level lower than the solitary falcons, and they had to withstand Jun Moxi's sudden and ferocious onslaught. They were in a very difficult situation, and they felt as if their backs were being pierced. In fact, they even felt as if their skin was being torn apart. Xiao Buyu's face revealed an evil grin. He had been accumulating power for a long time. So, he slashed out with a loud bang. However, the entire field was filled with cries of alarm. That was because Jun Moxi's figure had suddenly disappeared. He had suddenly disappeared. He had disappeared as if he had flown away. It seemed as if he had never appeared. That cylindrical sword light had also disappeared without a trace. It had quietly disappeared without the slightest warning. That magnificent sword light from before had seemed like a dream. Xiao Buyu's speed had already reached his limit. He wasn't Jun Moxi. So, he didn't have the luxury of time to change his moves. His palms carried a majestic strength that could topple mountains and overturn the seas. His target had suddenly disappeared. It was as if he had attacked the 7 swords. He had only managed to raise the angle of his attack in his haste. Then, he whizzed over the 7 swords, and fiercely attacked Solitary Eagle. The pressure on the 7 swords suddenly disappeared. They were overjoyed to see that Xiao Buyu had turned into a powerful reinforcement. So, they counterattacked Solitary Eagle with all their might. Solitary Eagle had suddenly encountered a powerful enemy in a hurry. And, the pressure from the enemy had doubled in an instant. So, he couldn't help but become angry. So, this brat isn't here to help. He's here to cause trouble. Don't tell me that it's too easy for me to fight 7 people. But, there was no other way. The 8 enemies were attacking him at the same time. So, even someone as strong as Solitary Eagle had no choice but to go all out. He heard the eagle god shout, "Ghostly Eagle!" He attacked with all his might. Suddenly, the sky was covered with sharp claw shadows. It seemed as if thousands of evil spirits had rushed out of the gates of hell. Countless illusory ghostly claws pounced on the Silver Blizzard City's 8 people. The 7 swords chi whistled in the air. Xiao Buyu's palm wind rumbled. Solitary Eagle's ghostly eagle's claw chi tore through the night sky. The 9 people collided like Mars colliding with the earth. Suddenly, a burst of arrogant laughter rang out the moment the 9 people collided. It was Da Xiao's Jun Moxi's voice. He had disappeared from that place for some unknown reason. And, he had reappeared in front of the exhausted Xiao Han on the ground. Such an astonishing speed was simply unpredictable. In fact, it would be more accurate to say that 2 Jun Moxis had appeared in 2 different places at the same time. That would be more in line with the facts. However, these 2 Jun Moxis were the same person. And, this fact had become something that no one could understand even if they broke their heads. Chapter 418. Despicable Junior. You dare. Xiao Buyu roared. His eyes seemed as if they were about to split open. That's my grandson. Xiao Buyu felt as if his courage had been shattered, and his heart was being twisted. Raging emotions, in an instant, completely ignited his entire being. He had gone berserk with rage. The hair on Xiao Buyu's head stood up in anger at this moment. It seemed as if he had been struck by lightning on a rainy day, but he could only fly into a rage, and nothing more. But he couldn't do anything. In fact, he didn't dare to do anything. That was because the solitary eagle's tyrannical attack had already collided with his own palm. How could the all-out attack of a great master be ordinary? Xiao Buyu was only a step away from the great master realm. And he had 7 powerful helpers. But the situation was still not optimistic. It was like an atomic bomb had exploded in the middle of the battle. The 8 figures had split into 8 directions, and had shot back. The solitary eagle stood in the center. He hadn't moved an inch. His long hair was fluttering in the wind. It seemed as if the seaweed at the bottom of the sea had encountered a hurricane. However, his body had sunk into the ground from his waist down. The great master of the Xian realm hadn't retreated even an inch in the face of the torrential attacks of the 8 experts. Xiao Buyu flew back with blood dripping from the corners of his mouth. But he didn't have the time to check his injuries. He hadn't even had the time to stop his retreating momentum. Instead, he let out a long and mournful cry, and threw himself toward Xiao Han. His face was distorted with grief, indignation, rage, and tyranny. Jun Wuyi and Xiao Han fought, and Jun Wuyi had gained an overwhelming advantage. So, he had finally been able to press Xiao Han down and beat him up. Moreover, he had broken Xiao Han's arms and legs, and had even smashed his dantian. In fact, Xiao Han's meridians had been broken in many places. It could be said that Xiao Han had become a cripple from head to toe. Jun Wuyi didn't want to kill him. But he wanted him to become a cripple. He wanted him to suffer more than death. He wanted him to taste this pain before he could kill him. But he had vented his anger. At this moment, Xiao Han was definitely more crippled than Jun Wuyi back then. However, Xiao Buyu was very clear about Jun Wuyi's plans. Therefore, he was not impatient. Perhaps Xiao Han would no longer be able to cultivate Xian Qi in the future, but with the Xiao family's soul-replenishing jade, Xiao Han's injuries could still be healed. And this was something that Jun Wuyi did not know. In fact, Xiao Buyu intended to use this as a pretext to resolve the enmity between the Jun and the Xiao family. After all, Xiao Han was the root cause of everything that had happened. However, Xiao Buyu wasn't doing this because he wanted to show weakness. He wasn't willing to give up on Xiao Han. Instead, it was because the mysterious expert behind the Jun family was too frightening. If this matter could be resolved like this, it would be an easy matter for both sides. On the other hand, Xiao Buyu was also very relieved. He believed that Xiao Han would be crippled, or even humiliated by Jun Wuyi. But his life wouldn't be in any danger. After all, he understood the third master Jun's character. Jun Wuyi and Xiao Han had a deep enmity. But Jun Wuyi was still a gentleman. And no one could deny that. Even if a righteous gentleman wanted to torture and abuse someone, he wouldn't have any overly malicious ideas. That was unless he killed them with a sword. Therefore, Xiao Buyu felt more at ease when he saw that Jun Wuyi had beaten Xiao Han. At least, Xiao Han wouldn't have been crippled if Jun Wuyi hadn't used his sword. In fact, he would have been able to keep his life even if his injuries were very serious. However, things were different now that he was in Jun Moxi's hands. It was completely different. What kind of person was Jun Moxi? He was a cruel, vicious, and unscrupulous person. His methods of dealing with people couldn't be mentioned in the same breath as Jun Wuyi's. In fact, they were much more cruel and venomous. In fact, it wasn't only Jun Wuyi's methods that would make anyone's hair stand on end if they saw them. Jun Moxi had used all of his skills to successfully draw Xiao Buyu away. Then, he had turned his head to deal with Xiao Han. His original intention was to use this matter to provoke Xiao Buyu's anger. Then, he would have the opportunity to kill him in one fell swoop. Da Xiao's original intention was to sacrifice the blood of yellow flame to the divine sword's first cry. However, Jun Moxie suddenly felt his mind churn as he arrived at Xiao Han's side. An extreme feeling of grief and indignation suddenly filled his heart. An extreme thirst for cruelty flooded his mind. His entire soul. It seemed as if a white-robed, scholarly, and handsome middle-aged man had appeared in front of him. His gaze was gentle, but sharp. He stood tall and straight like a mountain. He had waved his hand, and a magnificent army had been bathed in blood. He had been invincible, and had never failed to conquer. He had been given the title of General in White. He had been the protector of Tianxiang's hundreds of millions of people. But, he had been cruelly murdered by Xiao Han's narrow-minded heart. Jun Moxie's eyes had turned red. His heart was filled with indignation, rage, and an endless desire to kill. His anger had risen from his heart, and his courage had risen. Then, another mighty and handsome middle-aged man appeared in front of him. It was his second uncle, Jun Wumeng, whom he had no chance to meet. The scene in his mind spun like a lantern. A gentle and virtuous woman was looking at him lovingly. Her eyes were filled with endless love and affection. It was a motherly love as vast as the sea. Mother, two handsome young generals were looking at him. Their faces were almost identical to his. They were looking at him with great expectation. Revenge. Revenge. Suddenly, these two words resounded in Jun Moxie's mind like a tsunami. Only these two words. Only these two words. Jun Moxie didn't know how these images, scenes, and voices had suddenly appeared in his mind. But, they had suddenly appeared in his memory in such a strange and inexplicable manner. After all, those memories that had been fused still retained these beautiful past events. But now, these past events had turned into hatred as high as the heavens and as deep as the earth. A peerless hero and a peerless beauty had died unjustly because of a despicable villain like Xiao Han. Jun Xie suddenly felt as if his blood vessels were about to explode at this moment. An indescribable feeling of grief and indignation welled up in his heart. It rushed into his mind, and scattered his clear consciousness. Revenge. How can a hero die in vain? How can a warrior be wronged? Jun Moxie roared. His eyes were bloodshot as he raised his sword. Xiao Buyu turned his head to look, and saw Jun Moxie's sword poking out Xiao Han's eyeballs. Then, he said something extremely ruthless, Xiao Buyu, I will make sure that your grandson can't see this. This sword is for the thousands of soldiers you've killed. Xiao Han had been unconscious. But, he was awakened from his coma by the pain of his eyeballs being poked out. He screamed miserably. Then, there was a cracking sound as he crushed one of his teeth. His face was covered in blood as he screamed miserably in pain. He was incomparably resentful, Jun Wui. I, Xiao Han, will take revenge. I will turn your Jun family's men and women into prostitutes. Ah! The murderous intention in Jun Moxie's eyes intensified. The murderous aura on his body became even thicker. Xiao Buyu roared as he flew even faster. My grandson, Jun Moxie, stop. Otherwise, I'll chop your body into 10,000 pieces. However, Jun Moxie was in front of Xiao Han. So, it was very convenient for him to do so. His sword flashed again, and two of Xiao Han's tendons were cut off. Blood splattered everywhere. Xiao Buyu's body trembled violently as he spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes were filled with despair. Xiao Han. I want you to be unable to move your hands. Xiao Han, do you want to take revenge? I'll accompany you to the heavens and the earth. This sword will wash away the family's humiliation. Jun Moxie clenched his teeth as he laughed sinisterly, Xiao Buyu. Aren't you an expert of the Shenxian family? Aren't you the strongest person under the great masters? Come quickly and save your grandson. Come quickly. Don't you dare. Even if you have legs, you'll still be crippled. This sword belongs to my third uncle. Give my third uncle back his 10 years of slumber. The sword light flashed twice, and Xiao Han's leg tendons were severed. Jun Mo Xie's eyes were exceptionally clear. The corners of his mouth curled into a fierce smile as he slanted his eyes at Xiao Buyu. Then, he sneered and roared, "This sword is for my father. Xiao Han, can't listen from now on." No! The Silver Blizzard City's people shouted in unison. However, Jun Moxie's sword flashed again, and Xiao Han's ears flew off his body. Then, Xiao Han's nose flew up into the air. His teeth were cut off, and half of his tongue flew out. "You can't speak. This is my second uncle's debt." Jun Mo Xie laughed wildly. He seemed to be in a somewhat desolate mood. Xiao Buyu's blood started to churn. He had been injured by the solitary falcon's attack. His injuries weren't serious, but they were still internal injuries. So, he couldn't help but feel his blood churn as he saw his grandson in such a miserable state. He was a spirit Xian expert, but he was still a blood relative. So, he couldn't help but feel his blood churning. He landed a dozen steps away from Jun Moxie. He staggered a few steps, and stood up with difficulty. Then, he raised his head, and spat out a mouthful of blood. He could only see a golden light flashing before his eyes. He looked powerlessly at Jun Moxie. Then, he clenched his teeth and spoke in a low voice, "Jun Moxie, you're very ruthless. Aren't you afraid of karma? Aren't you afraid of retribution?" Jun Moxie looked at him cruelly. Then, he laughed sinisterly and said, "Xiao Buyu, you still have the nerve to talk about karma? Didn't you think that this day would come when your Xiao family was plotting against our Jun family? Didn't you feel ruthless when hundreds of thousands of soldiers were turned into piles of bones because of this animal's selfish desires? When countless families were broken up because of him, you were happy, weren't you? Weren't you happy? What qualifications do you have to say that I'm ruthless? There are hundreds of thousands of orphans and widows in this world because of your selfish desires. How many of them have been bullied to death? And, all of them are the descendants of those brave and loyal soldiers. Countless heroes of this world have suffered injustice because of you. Because your fists are big. Big? Big your mother's head. Fu *k. You're a bunch of trash. A bunch of trash. A bunch of green-haired turtles. Now, you're watching your grandson turn into a monster under my hands. Isn't that satisfying? Ha! Isn't that satisfying? You old bastard. I'm telling you that your grandson alone isn't enough. It's far from enough. Just you wait. You'll see your own descendants die after you try it a few more times. Then, you'll be even more satisfied. Jun Moxie burst into laughter. His laughter was mournful. An ominous glint flickered in Xiao Buyu's eyes. He had already made up his mind. He was crazily determined for Jun Moxie. My two elder brothers are watching from heaven. I'll make sure that the main culprit has eyes but can't see, mouth but can't speak, ears but can't hear, and limbs will be crippled. I'll make sure that he doesn't have any descendants. I'll make him a laughingstock for all eternity. Jun Moxie faced upwards and screamed. He pointed his sword towards the sky. The blood on the blade of his sword quickly flowed out. Then, the sword flashed, and blood splashed out from Xiao Han's crotch. A large piece of flesh flew out. Jun Moxie had kicked it into pieces in the air. It had turned into a bloody dust. Xiao Han didn't even have the strength to move. But, he wasn't dead yet. But, he would have been happier if his body had been smashed to pieces. Chapter 419. The Snake King was known as the King of Poisons. He had always been vicious and merciless. He was confident that he wasn't inferior to anyone in this world when it came to viciousness and cruelty. But at this moment, he was trembling all over, and his eyes were filled with intense shock. There was actually such a cruel punishment in this world. Such a cruel and cold-blooded person. Could it be that Jun Imosie's heart is made of iron? He could be so cold, callous, almost cold-blooded, and so ruthless. It was only right and proper for him to do such a thing. Even the expression of the white-clothed girl, who had always remained calm even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of her, had changed. It had become deep and unfathomable. This guy was really ruthless. The so-called death by 1,000 cuts, dismemberment by 5 horses, dismemberment by 10,000 pieces, and chopping into meat paste were all ruthless words that most people knew. In fact, they had said it more than once. That was because many people had 1 or 2 targets of hatred in their hearts that they couldn't wait to do so. But when it came to this point, there were really too few people who could really do such things. Humans were humans. There was always a limit to how much hatred and mental pressure a person could endure. It could even be said that there might not be 1 in 10,000 people who could do such a thing. This was perhaps another meaning of knowing is easy, but doing it. Moreover, saying it was one thing, and doing it was another. It was another thing to actually do it, and still be able to maintain a straight face after doing it. It was almost impossible to find someone who could do it to this extent in this world. Because it involved exceeding the limits of a person's endurance. Anyone could talk ruthlessly. In fact, many of them had done so before. However, there were far fewer people who actually took action. However, as long as the hatred accumulated to a certain extent, once it exploded all at once, it might also be possible to carry out the extremely bloody actions mentioned above. However, for someone like Jun Moxie to do it in such a methodical manner, to finish it step by step, to the point where his expression didn't change, to the point where he could talk and laugh as if nothing had happened, that was really rare. Think about it, most of us would frown and raise our eyebrows when we see someone killing a chicken or a pig, not to mention that it's a living person. To remove the important parts of a living person's body one by one, not to mention doing it, we can't even imagine it. Xiao Buyu was a level 4 expert in Shenxian. But he couldn't bear it any longer. His eyes were sluggish as he looked at the lump of rotten flesh on the ground. It seemed as if he had been struck by lightning. In fact, he was left dumbstruck. He had never imagined that Jun Moxie would do this. He dared to do this. He was so ruthless and left no room for negotiation. Moreover, he wasn't the only one. The dozens of Xian Qi experts who were watching from the sidelines, as well as the high-ranking military officers who were used to seeing bloody scenes, couldn't help but hold their breaths. In fact, it was so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. The Silver Blizzard City's little princess, Han Yen Meng, could only let out an "oh." Then, her eyes rolled back, and she fainted in Mu Shuetong's arms. However, being able to faint at this moment was also a very fortunate thing. Xiao Han didn't see the pile of rotten flesh squirming on the ground. He was on the brink of death. So, he wanted to faint. In fact, he wanted to die. He wanted to end this endless pain. It was too painful. But death was already a great luxury for him. So, he couldn't even talk about fainting. The faces of the other 5 elders of the Silver Blizzard City turned red. But they were still trapped by that huge force. So, they couldn't move even an inch. They could only gnash their teeth and open their eyes wide. They had already determined that this huge force must have come from a peerless expert. In fact, it might even be the mysterious expert behind the Jun family. So, it might be a good thing that they couldn't intervene. But, if they were to intervene and provoke that mysterious expert, then, that mysterious expert would have been able to kill them with a wave of his hand, so, it wasn't too far from the truth. The powerful force that had trapped them had indeed come from a peerless expert. But, it wasn't the mysterious expert behind the Jun family. Instead, it was the white-clothed girl who had intervened. Ha 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 ha! Suddenly, a burst of gentle and clear laughter rang out in the midst of the deathly silence. Everyone looked towards the source of the laughter, and saw that the person who had laughed had a gentle and indifferent expression on his face. His smile was amiable, and his body was like a jade tree facing the wind. He stood tall and proud. It was none other than June Moxie. The person who had laughed was none other than June Moxie. Even at this moment, he could still laugh. After creating such a tragic scene with his own hands, he could still laugh as if nothing had happened. This is refreshing. June Moxie looked at Xiao Buyu with interest. Second Master Xiao, did you know? When the long sword in my hand slowly cuts into the flesh of the person I hate the most, this kind of feeling is simply too wonderful, it is simply indescribable. No, just the word wonderful is simply insufficient to describe this kind of pleasure. Especially, this person's surname is Xiao, his name is Xiao Han, and my surname is June. Xiao Buyu's body had been as motionless as a mountain. But, he was now swaying in a strange manner. His eyes were firmly fixed on June Moxie. His throat was issuing a strange hee-hee-hee sound. But, he couldn't say a single word. You don't need to speak. I understand your feelings very well. I can express my understanding towards you. In fact, I can even express my sympathy. In fact, I sympathize with you from the bottom of my heart. June Moxie heaved a long sigh and said, after all, he's his own flesh and blood. After all, it's a family of blood. It's a tragedy for a person with white hair to send off a person with black hair. Especially. I'm sorry. How could I have spoken the truth? I'm really sorry. I said the wrong thing. I'll pay attention next time. June Moxie then changed the topic. That's not right. I've said the wrong thing. Look at me. I was too happy and excited just now. So, I didn't even notice that I had said the wrong thing. I hope you don't take offense to it. Cough cough. Actually, you should be grateful to me. Xiao Han is crippled. But, I've spared his life after all. In other words, that the person with white hair sending off a person with black hair isn't valid. Don't you agree with me? June Moxie rubbed his hands together. He looked a little embarrassed as he said, besides, he's not completely crippled. I haven't broken his spine yet. I'm a soft-hearted person. So, I was soft-hearted for a moment. So, I didn't do it. How about I make up for it if you feel that I didn't do it properly because of this? I guarantee that you'll be satisfied. Once again, I would like to express my apologies to you. You're a demon. Xiao Buyu's lips trembled. He felt indescribable grief and indignation. Demon, I really don't like those two words. In fact, you think too highly of me. I'm not worthy of those two words. June Moxie shook his head in disapproval. You should consider replacing them. That's because I can't be considered a demon when compared to your Xiao family. He raised his sword, and pointed its point downwards. Xiao Han's blood quickly flowed down from the tip of the sword. But the sword's blade had regained its clarity in the blink of an eye. I've learned what a divine weapon is today. Hee hee. You've killed 1,000,000 people, and your blade hasn't been stained with blood. I used to think that this was just empty talk. But, I now know that such a sword truly exists. It's a good sword. June Moxie sighed. Everyone's bodies trembled as they heard this. You've killed 1,000,000 people, and your blade hasn't been stained with blood. Second Master Xiao, I know that you're deliberately acting as if you're on the verge of collapse. But, you're planning to kill me in one fell swoop. You've made up your mind to kill me today. So, you don't care about the consequences. Isn't that right? June Moxie smiled wholeheartedly as he said, of course. You've just been injured. And, your spirit has also been affected. So, you'll need some time to prepare, right? Let me ask you something during this time. Second Master Xiao, do you know about the Hall of Huanghua? The Hall of Huanghua. Jun Wui's eyes suddenly flashed with a dazzling light. The third Master Jun would never forget the tragic scene he had witnessed when he and Jun Moxie had stormed into the hall of Huanghua that day. Jun Wui trembled with anger every time he thought of that tragedy. Xiao Buyu looked at Jun Moxie with bitter resentment. He did his utmost to summon up his strength, but he didn't say a word. I destroyed the Tianxiang city's hall of Huanghua. Isn't that a surprise? Jun Moxie's eyes flashed with a frightening light. His previous laughter and curses had been swept away. Instead, he had become ruthless and cruel. His voice was filled with a murderous aura. Everything was an accident. My original intention was very simple when I had destroyed the Hall of Huanghua. I had thought that it was an inhumane money-making organization. But I realized that I was wrong when I saw a training ground for prostitutes in the Tianxiang city. In fact, I was extremely wrong. That's because even those evil human traffickers who force women into prostitution can't do such a despicable thing as the Hall of Huanghua did. Boys and girls who don't have good aptitudes and looks can only be exiled. Or, they can be resold. Or, they can be used as supplements. Or, they can be groomed into manservants or pimps. In any case, even the relatively inhumane human traffickers rarely do things that are completely heartless. Breaking people's legs and hands, breaking their lumbar vertebrae, and putting them in a jar to raise them, to make them completely deformed, this kind of thing, only the heartless, deranged, and inhumane Hall of Hell would do such a thing. There was no precedent for such a thing. That's why I found it strange. That's why I started to think about something. I thought, what kind of deep hatred could lead the master of the Hall of Huanghua to do such a thing to these children? These children obviously wouldn't provoke them. So, there's only one thing. What kind of hatred could the master of the Hall of Huanghua have with the parents of these children? What kind of hatred could drive them to do such a thing to these children? One night, my grandfather Jun and my third uncle were talking about their old comrades. Then, they unintentionally sighed. How come those old subordinates of mine have disappeared? They should have come to see me even if they were disheartened, right? I would have been very happy to know that they're still alive. Chapter 420. There's a saying that goes like this: the speaker may not mean it, but the listener takes it to heart. So, I arranged for someone to investigate my father's old subordinates. I wanted to know where they were, and how they were doing. The investigation went on for a month and a half. And, all the results told me one thing. These people, along with their parents and children, had mysteriously disappeared at some point in time. Then, I went to investigate the various regions during that period of time. I discovered that there had been countless cases of murder and destruction of corpses during that period. But, these cases had turned into cases without any clues. All the corpses were the same. So, I couldn't tell who they were. The only thing I could be sure of was that those corpses weren't of the elderly. They were of the adults. But, there were no corpses of children. Jun Moxie's voice became filled with grief and indignation. Therefore, I began to wonder, who were the children that the Huanghua Hall had killed? These children were the orphans of those old soldiers. Then, it would mean that they had been implicated by our Jun family. So, the mastermind behind the Huanghua Hall must have a great enmity with our Jun family. But, who is this mastermind? Jun Moxie met Xiao Buyu's resentful gaze. Then, his own gaze also became fierce and resentful. He took a step forward to meet Xiao Buyu's gaze, and asked in a heavy tone, "Second Master Xiao, I've heard that you're the wisest elder of the Xiao family. Can you tell me? Who is the mastermind behind the Huanghua Hall? Who's so heartless? Who has such a great enmity with our Jun family? How can they be so deranged as to vent their anger on innocent people? Second Master Xiao, tell me, who is this person?" Jun Moxie took a step forward with every question he asked. The biting cold murderous aura on his body became even thicker with every step he took. His gaze was like a knife as he stared intently at Xiao Buyu. Xiao Buyu finally turned his eyes away under Jun Dashao's intense gaze. He didn't dare to look at Dashao's eyes again. Xiao Buyu unconsciously retreated as Jun Moxie moved forward step by step. His gaze, which had always been solemn, seemed to be a little confused and lax. The dignified Shenxian powerhouse was at a loss when faced with Jun Moxie's questioning. The sound of Jun Moxie's heavy footsteps entered Xiao Buyu's ears. Every step he took was like a thunderclap from the ninth heaven. It pounded on Xiao Buyu's heart. How would I know who it is? What kind of weird things are you talking about? Xiao Buyu seemed extremely angry as he asked. But his voice was trembling. The voice of a Shenxian powerhouse was trembling. Anyone with a little bit of experience would have realized that there was something fishy about it. I was only suspicious at first. But Xiao Han came to the Tianxiang city not long after the eradication of the Huanghua Hull. Moreover, he took the initiative to go to the Jun family to cause trouble for my third uncle. How did he get here so quickly? Why did he come at such a good time? Second Master Xiao, can you answer me? Don't tell me that someone as wise as you can't think of anything. Jun Moxie looked at him fiercely. Are you suspecting me? How could this old man do such a thing? What evidence do you have? Xiao Buyu shouted. I'm not suspecting you. The Silver Blizzard City's Xingyun Buyu is a famous person. So, he wouldn't do such a thing. There are so many tragedies, and so many unsolved cases. It's hard to explain why there aren't any clues in one or two cases. But there aren't any clues in so many cases. So, it's worth pondering. What kind of power could suppress so many cases? Evidence? You're asking me for evidence. Why would someone leave any evidence if they had the intention to do such a thing? Jun Moxie smiled in a strange manner, but I'm very puzzled about something else. Why did you ask me, are you suspecting me? Why didn't you ask me, are you suspecting my Xiao family? Or, are you suspecting Xiao Han? Ha! Wise and far-sighted Xiao Buyu, second Master Xiao, I remember what I just said. I was talking about Xiao Han. So, why did you drag yourself into this? Isn't this a lucky hit? Isn't it a self-confession? Xiao Buyu staggered back once again. His forehead was dripping with sweat as he roared, nonsense. You don't have any evidence. You're slandering a good person. You're slandering my Xiao family. What are your intentions? Second Master, you're wrong again. I was talking about Xiao Han a moment ago. But, you're saying that I'm slandering your Xiao family? What do you mean? Do you think that Xiao Han can represent the entire Xiao family? Jun Moxie pressed forward step by step. He was taking advantage of the victory to pursue the attack. The sharp light in his eyes was becoming more and more intense. Up until now, Jun Moxie's methods had been effective step by step. Xiao Buyu's mind was in chaos. He no longer had the determination to fight the enemy to the death. First, he had tangled with Xiao Han. Then, he had used Solitary Eagle's hand to injure him. Then, he had abused Xiao Han. And, he had used that to open a gap in Xiao Buyu's mental defenses. Then, he had mentioned the tragic story of the Huanghua Hull. And, he had completely shattered Xiao Buyu's mental defenses. Jun Moxie, you're spewing venomous slander. Do you have proof that my Xiao family has any evidence? Your tongue is as sharp as a knife. But, you can't pin this crime on my Xiao family. Xiao Buyu's face was dripping with sweat. His facial muscles were contorting in a crazed manner. Evidence? I've said it more than once. I don't have any. I'm only suspicious. But, my suspicions are enough. Jun Moxie's gaze was as cold as a knife. Xiao Buyu, do you think that we need any bullshit evidence at this point? Under the heavens, who else could make the eldest prince willingly give up his side courtyard and not leak any information? Which force could suppress so many headless cases? And which force has such a great enmity with my Jun family? Jun Moxie had lowered his voice when he had spoken the last sentence. Only a few people could hear him. Jun Wui's face had contorted in a strange manner. In fact, his contorted face had turned very sinister and frightening. These were only Jun Moxie's speculations. And Jun Moxie had to admit that they were only speculations. But these speculations were very reasonable. And they were all pointing in the same direction. Jun Wui's tiger-like eyes were overflowing with tears. He wanted to grow a pair of wings, fly back to the capital, and settle down those pitiful children. Did you know? I had received a commission from someone not long ago. And I had taken her money. She had sworn to exterminate the Huanghua Hall. That helpless girl's face seemed to appear in Jun Moxie's mind. Then, her little brother's small body appeared in front of him. And that half a copper coin was still in his bosom. That's my reward. I've accepted it. So, I'll see it through to the end. Jun Moxie's voice became ruthless. You can rest assured, Xiao Buyu. I won't kill a single member of the Xiao family. That's because I'll cripple your cultivation one by one. I'll cut off your tongues, ears, and noses. I'll knock out your teeth. I'll cut off the tendons of your hands and feet. I'll cut off your children's roots. And I'll smash your spines. And I'll put each and every one of you in a jar. And I'll keep you alive until the day you die of old age. I'll make everyone in the world see that this is the fate of despicable villains. This is the fate of inhumane people. Are you satisfied with my arrangements? You dare. Xiao Buyu took 2 steps back. His eyes were scattered and helpless. Then, he roared again, you dare. But everyone looked at him with disdain. Then, he realized that his voice had become very powerless. It didn't have the slightest effect on him. Shen Xian was a level 4 expert. He was the closest to the great master level. But his mind had been thoroughly defeated by Jun Moxie. He hadn't participated in the Huanghua Hall's matter. But that didn't mean that his conscience wasn't guilty. That was because Xiao Han was his grandson. Moreover, none of this would have happened if he hadn't supported Xiao Han's cold-blooded revenge. Everyone has a dark side in their hearts. It doesn't matter how deeply they hide it. It doesn't matter how well they hide it. It doesn't matter how despicable, shameless, refined, or hypocritical they are. But they'll find it difficult to bear the consequences once they're exposed to the world. Xiao Buyu had collapsed. He didn't have the slightest bit of power to resist. The 3rd, 6th, and 9th elders had different expressions on their faces. Some of them were ashamed. Some of them were resentful. The 7 swords of the Silver Blizzard City looked at them with disdain. They hadn't even dreamed that the Xiao family would commit such an inhumane and insane thing. Han Yen Meng had also woken up from her coma. She had heard this shocking news. Her delicate body couldn't help but tremble. She looked at the Xiao family with eyes full of disgust and hatred. Anyone with a little bit of conscience would not remain indifferent after hearing about such an unparalleled and cruel thing. Jun Moxie had interrogated them step by step. Then, they had seen Xiao Buyu's reaction. In fact, they would have been better off dead if they hadn't figured out the clues. Xiao Buyu, how did your Xiao family infiltrate our million-strong army? You must know. Tell me. Everyone was lost in their own thoughts, and Xiao Buyu was a little absent-minded when Jun Xie suddenly roared like thunder. Who's the traitor? He shouted again. This roar had concentrated all of Jun Moxie's spiritual power. He had mobilized all of his pure spiritual power. His voice was so loud that it sounded like a lion's roar. It shook the surrounding torches, causing them to flicker a few times. Everyone felt their hearts tremble. Some of the weaker ones felt their minds go fuzzy. And the events of the past came flooding back to them. Chapter 421. The first update of today's outbreak has arrived. This is the 11th time this month. Jun Xie's loud shout came from the heavens amidst the silence. And it seemed as if a thunderclap had struck Xiao Buyu's shaky heart like a thunderclap. Jun Mo Xia would have asked Xiao Buyu about the Huanghua Hall. And, Xiao Buyu would have subconsciously resisted with all his might if he'd asked about it. Xiao Buyu's mind would have collapsed, but he would have recovered very quickly if he had been at the level of Shenxian. Therefore, he would have lost the opportunity that had appeared with great difficulty. However, Jun Moxie had used one matter to strike into the abyss of Xiao Buyu's heart. Then, he had used another matter to strike his heart again. He had been caught off guard. Xiao Buyu's mind was in chaos. He muttered, "Traitors." Jun Moxie's voice changed. It became strangely gentle and amiable. It was full of magnetism. In fact, it sounded like a baby receiving its mother's caress in a cradle. But, it was also full of penetrating spirit. His eyes suddenly emitted a strange light as he looked into Xiao Buyu's eyes. He then slowly said, "The people who led you into the Jun family's camp? The people who helped you assassinate Jun Wuhui and Jun Wumeng? Who are they? Whose people are they?" Xiao Buyu's powerless eyes suddenly met Jun Moxie's. Their eyes struggled fiercely. But, it seemed as if their eyes had fused together. In fact, they couldn't be separated anymore. Xiao Buyu's eyelids suddenly drooped after a long time. He was at a loss when he opened them again. "These people. I heard that they were masked men dressed in red." Xiao Buyu's expression suddenly became very relaxed. He then continued as if he were talking in a dream, "I later found out that they were from the Blood Sword Hall. Moreover, they had arranged for the Xiao family's experts to enter the camp. Both sides had the same goal. So, they hit it off very well, the Blood Sword Hall." "Oh, he. Yes, it was them. But, why did they help you? Do they have the same goal? Do they want to harm Jun Wui? Or perhaps the entire Jun family? Or, is there someone else behind them directing them?" Blood Sword Hall. A sharp light flashed in Jun Moxie's eyes, but his voice became softer and softer. It was like a warm breeze blowing through the treetops, making everyone who heard it feel warm and comfortable. They felt extremely safe in front of this person who spoke with such a voice, and they wished they could just fall asleep. Xiao Buyu was the first to bear the brunt of it. His heart was shaken, and his expression was sincere. In fact, it seemed as if he had forgotten all the grief and indignation he had felt earlier. Hypnosis and soul assimilation. This psychological hypnosis method, which had only been developed in China in recent times, was combined with the ancient martial arts of China. Finally, at the most critical moment, Jun Moxie had successfully used it. Jun Moxie took advantage of Xiao Buyu's mental breakdown, and opened the door to his inner heart. So, he rushed in like a bolt of lightning. A beginner Tian Xian hypnotized a rank for Shen Xian. This kind of mystical secret technique that had never appeared in this different world had actually established such an extraordinary technique in one fell swoop. Everyone looked at each other with amazement. The white-clothed girl's eyes shone with a strange light as she looked at Jun Moxie. It seemed as if she wanted to see through this mysterious youth. She had never seen or heard of such a mystical technique before. Even with her cultivation, she could not help but feel a strong shock and awe. "I don't know why they did it. Our Xiao family had made preparations to attack the army at that time. But, we hadn't expected that they would take the initiative to contact us. Our goals were the same. So, we reached an agreement very easily. And, everything went unexpectedly smoothly." Xiao Buyu's face revealed a childlike pride. But, his eyes were empty. "We couldn't find any trace of them after that. The people who had come to their aid were different every time. They all had very high statuses. But, we never saw them again. I presume that the Blood Sword Hall has taken care of them. The Blood Sword Hall's way of doing things is very watertight." He. "You also don't know where they came from?" Jun Moxie nodded in understanding. Then, he spoke in a gentle and encouraging tone. "Yes." Xiao Buyu revealed an ashamed look on his face. He hung his head like a child who had made a mistake. I didn't participate in the operation at that time. It was little Han and his brothers who did it. I only heard about it afterwards. Then, a proud expression appeared on his face as he said loftily, they did it, and they did it. Their fists are the ones who make the most sense. Moreover, those ants aren't worthy of me, Xiao Buyu, personally dealing with them. Ah, that's right. Very good. The fists are the ones who make the most sense. The veins on Jun Moxie's forehead throbbed. He controlled himself and said, then, are they the ones who will deal with Jun Mou and Jun Wui later on? Yes, it's them, the people of the Blood Sword Hall. Xiao Buyu didn't hesitate. Who participated in the operation at that time? Xiao Han's brothers? There must have been a lot of people, right? Jun Moxie chuckled. His expression was gentle. Yes. How could they have been so fast with so few people? They were in the middle of an army. So, there were many dangers. Ah! I remember Xiao Han, Xiao Liang, Xiao Zhen, Xiao Cheng, Xiao Guang. Xiao Buyu said 14 or 15 names in succession. Then, he sighed and said, we finally made the hateful Jun family pay the price. They must pay the price for provoking our Xiao family. They paid the price. But, Jun Wui had only snatched Xiao Han's fiancée. So, aren't you making a big fuss over a minor issue by carrying out such a big operation? Jun Moxie firmly remembered these names in his heart. Then, he changed the subject and asked another question. Who does Xiao Han think he is from the Silver Blizzard City's lineup? Why does he have so much influence? How could we make a big fuss over a minor issue? There's a lot to do with it. The current lord of the Silver Blizzard City has no children. He only has 2 daughters. His eldest daughter and Han are betrothed at birth. His second daughter also has hopes of marrying into the Xiao family in the future. So, we're all working hard. The Silver Blizzard City will belong to our Xiao family if both of them marry into our Xiao family. Our Xiao family's ancestors sacrificed their lives for the Silver Blizzard City. Moreover, they were the strongest Xian cultivators. They were the lord of the Silver Blizzard City at that time. In fact, they were the first sworn brothers of the Silver Blizzard City. It can be said that the Silver Blizzard City belonged to our Xiao family. But the Han family became the lord of the Silver Blizzard City after our ancestors passed away. Why has our Xiao family been suppressed for hundreds of years? We're brothers in name. But, we're nothing more than high-ranking subordinates. Why? A bullshit oath that doesn't even scratch the itch has completely stripped away all the hope of our Xiao family. Why? Xiao Buyu's face suddenly turned malevolent. That damn Jun Wui has interfered when our plan was about to succeed. He's ruined our plan. Our Xiao family has been waiting for this opportunity for hundreds of years. But, that damn Jun Wui has ruined it. That damn Jun Wui. Damn Jun Wui. They must pay the price. Whoever dares to obstruct our Xiao family's plan must be exterminated. Xiao Buyu cursed bitterly. When this shocking news came out, it was like an earth-shattering explosion. The people of the Silver Blizzard City were frightened. The remaining 3rd, 5th, 6th, 8th, and 9th elders were also divided into 2 camps. They were still intimidated by the hidden aura. So, they didn't dare to move. But, their expressions and their eyes had clearly revealed their fear. It was clear that the 6th, 8th, and 9th elders were panicking. Their eyes were filled with extreme fear. There was no doubt that these 3 elders were from the Xiao family. However, the 3rd elder and the 5th elder's faces were filled with indignation. In fact, they were on the verge of cursing out loud. These 2 were from the Han family's side. However, Han Yen Meng was the one who had suffered the most. Her pretty eyes were wide open. She couldn't believe her ears. She had never imagined that the Xiao family's amiable grandfathers and uncles would be plotting against her own family. Jun Moxie secretly swept his eyes around. Then, he continued to ask, the Xiao family is indeed far-sighted. Their arrangements are exquisite. But, don't tell me that the Han family doesn't have any male descendants? The city lord doesn't have a son. But, he should have a brother, right? Don't tell me that his brother doesn't have a son. Does he have to pass it on to the Shao family? This is wishful thinking on our part. Hee. We've been planning to take over the Shao family's nest. So, we've been thinking about this for a long time. Xiao Buyu smiled proudly and said, we've been planning things since the birth of the city lord's second daughter. The other brothers of the city lord have either become crippled in some accident, or they've left the central command. Moreover, many of them are my and elder brother's disciples. We naturally know how to train them. You should know about Shao Han's Huanghua Hall, right? Isn't this a joint decision of your Shao family? Jun Moxie changed the topic and asked. His forehead was already dripping with sweat. Even his vest was soaked with sweat. He had been using his spiritual power to hypnotize a super expert like Xiao Buyu. This was an exceptionally difficult task. Jun Moxie's spiritual power was formidable enough. But, he felt powerless at the moment. Therefore, he changed the topic back to the Jun family's matters. Xiao Buyu had lost his vigilance towards the person who had spoken after a period of conversation. No, this matter was decided by Xiao Han and his brothers. No. Han and his brothers had acted on their own. What's done can't be undone by the time we found out about it. So, we had no choice but to let them be. Very few people in the Shao family know about this matter. After all, it's very disgraceful. And, it hurts the harmony of the world. Fortunately, they're just some ants. Moreover, the profits from that matter are very good. Xiao Buyu's face was very conflicted. He was apologetic. No one could have imagined that this white-haired, ruddy, virtuous, or at least sanctimonious old senior's heart was actually so dirty and vile. If he did not say it himself and they heard it with their own ears, who in the world would believe it? Who would have dared to believe it? How shameless. Well, you've done well. I've decided to reward you. It's a very, very big reward. Jun Moxie's eyes blazed as he spoke in a leisurely manner, a very, very big reward? What kind of reward is that? Xiao Buyu's face revealed an excited expression. In fact, he looked like a child who had just seen a delicious and good-looking candy. Ah, but you'll have to perform a striptease dance before I give you your reward. The reward will come once you're done. You'll be very satisfied with it. A vicious light flashed in Jun Moxie's eyes. Chapter 422. He's too weak. His endurance is too weak. Jun Moxie was standing not far from Xiao Buyu. Xiao Buyu had been passionately performing a striptease a moment ago. So, Xiao Buyu's self-detonation had been too abrupt. Da Xiao hadn't been able to react in time. Xiao Buyu's self-detonation had been for the sake of freeing himself. So, it hadn't been lethal. But, Da Xiao had still been caught off guard by the sudden change in the situation. Da Xiao wiped his face and shook his head. He then spoke up in a somewhat dissatisfied manner. How could he commit suicide in such a straightforward manner? He's the most powerful person under the Great Master level. He can't even bear this much. I haven't even used my methods yet. But, it's a pity that his white buttocks are gone. Fu*K. I was planning to cut open his great-grandson's scalp and pour mercury into it. Or, I would have cracked open his skull, and boiled his brain. But, I didn't even get to carry out that good show. And, he died without a trace. He was too hasty. He didn't even have the demeanor of a powerhouse. He's too inferior. His reputation is better than meeting him in person. But, his reputation isn't as good as meeting him in person. He's too sloppy. Everyone who heard his words had the same expression on their faces. Their eyes were fixed on Da Xiao. Their eyeballs were frozen in place. Xiao Fengwu was the only person who could still stand up. His legs were strumming like a pipa. His small face was deathly pale. In fact, it seemed as if he had just boiled lime. However, the inexplicable power that had shrouded the 5 elders suddenly dispersed at this moment. In fact, it seemed as if it had come without a sound. In fact, it didn't leave any trace behind. The 5 elders regained their mobility at the same time. But they were divided into 2 camps the moment they regained their mobility. The 3 elders of the Shao family were confronting the 2 elders of the Han family. And both sides were looking at each other with extreme hatred in their eyes. Only the 3 elders of the Shao clan had a hint of shame in their eyes, but not much. The 5 of them were basically in the same state. They were all sweating profusely under the enormous pressure and their clothes were drenched in sweat. Their faces were also extremely tired. It was obvious that they had exhausted all their strength when resisting the powerful force and could no longer hold on. However, each of them stared at each other, wishing that they could swallow this ally who was still their brother just a quarter of an hour ago. Surnamed Shao. Hello. What a good scheme, what a good scheme. It's really good. The 3rd elder angrily gasped for breath. His eyes seemed to be burning with fire. For so many years, the city lord has always been courteous to the Shao family. He has always been modest and accommodating. Who would have thought that he would raise a tiger and bring disaster upon himself? Bah! Raising a tiger is a waste of the king of beasts. He is simply raising a pack of wolves that cannot be tamed. People like you still have the face to live in this world? The 8th elder coldly snorted and said, Han Fei Yun, what are you going to do? The 3rd elder trembled in anger. His words were particularly rude. What do you think I will do to your Shao family? If I were you, I wouldn't be able to continue living. I would have hung myself on a tree. You're so shameless, and you're repaying kindness with ingratitude. You want us to die. You don't have the qualifications to do so on your own, Han Fei Yun. Humph. Your Han family may not be able to gain the upper hand when we return to the Silver City. The 8th elder Leng Leng looked at him and sneered. We'll know whether I'm qualified or not after we try. The 3rd elder's thin face twitched. He suddenly raised his palm and shouted, 7 swords. Set up the formation. Execute the family's rules. Capture these 3 traitors of the Shao family for me. Xuetong, attack together with the 7 swords. These 3 traitors are strong on the outside but weak on the inside. They can't even withstand a single blow. The complexions of the 8th elder and the other 2 changed. It could be said that the strength of the 5 great elders had been suppressed by that mysterious and powerful pressure. So, the strength of Shen Xian had been reduced to less than 10%. It could be said that they were at their weakest moment. However, it was clear that they were fighting 3 against 2 at the moment. But, they still had the upper hand. The combined might of the 7 swords was extremely formidable. In fact, an ordinary spirit Xian expert wouldn't be able to contend against them in normal times. However, the solitary falcon of the prairie had sustained considerable injuries because of his battle with the great master-level expert. So, the 7 swords might not be able to take down the 3 elders of the Shao family. However, the Han family still had a middle-level expert, Tian Xian Mu Xuetong, whose strength hadn't been damaged. Mu Xuetong's strength was comparable to that of Tian Xian's. However, he wouldn't have been able to enter the eyes of a powerful expert like Shen Xian. However, things had changed with the passage of time. Mu Xuetong's insignificant character had now become a decisive trump card. Could it be that Mu Xuetong would be the one to end the internal strife of the Silver City? Suddenly, an unusually calm and unhurried voice sounded, "It's hard to say whether I'm qualified or not. It seems that I have the final say here. The life and death of the Shao family isn't up to them. But, it's not up to the Han family to decide." To be able to speak in such a leisurely manner in such a situation, there was no one else but young Master Jun. Da Xiao's body floated up as he spoke. Then, he suddenly disappeared from the sky, and appeared in front of Xiao Fengwu in a flash. Then, he stretched out his hand, and grabbed Xiao Fengwu's neck. Then, he retreated at an extremely fast speed, and left behind only a series of afterimages of him clutching Xiao Fengwu's neck. Then, Da Xiao returned to his original position. The only difference was that he was carrying a person in his hand. Xiao Fengwu had been scared stiff by the events that had transpired a moment ago. So, he couldn't even think of resisting when he saw Jun Moxie appear in front of him like a ghost. The 6th, 8th, and 9th elders became anxious when they saw Jun Moxie clutching Xiao Fengwu's neck like a chicken waiting to be slaughtered. They couldn't care less about their weak bodies. So, they stepped forward at the same time. Jun Moxie, every injustice has its perpetrator, and every debt has its debtor. Xiao Fengwu hasn't offended your Jun family. So, don't try to bully the weak and implicate the innocent. It was no wonder that the 3 Xiao elders were so anxious. After all, the Han family didn't have many male descendants. But the Xiao family didn't have many male descendants. But there weren't many of them besides Xiao Fengwu. And Xiao Fengwu's aptitude was the best among the Xiao family's younger generation. How am I bullying the weak? This young master isn't even 17 years old. And, your young master Xiao is almost 20 years old, right? Every injustice has its perpetrator, and every debt has its debtor. How can someone from your Xiao family say such a thing? Don't you always believe in venting your anger on others? Don't you like to follow your heart and do whatever you want? Don't tell me that Xiao Buyu made up everything he said. And, you didn't even know about it? I'll go to hell with your grandpas. Jun Moxie used his free hand to pick his ear. He couldn't believe his ears as he cursed. Suddenly, a hissing sound echoed from all around as he spoke. And the 7 swords of the Silver City sneered. Your Xiao family has caused millions of people to lose their homes because of your personal grievances. And hundreds of thousands of people have died because of you. And that's not the end of it. You've harmed countless children. And you still have the face to say that every injustice has its perpetrator. Perhaps anyone would have the right to say such a thing. But only the Xiao family could say such a thing. Jun Moxie looked at them coldly. He was calm, but his eyes were brimming with a murderous aura. Then, he slowly said, I had promised Xiao Buyu that I wouldn't let anyone from the Xiao family off. A man can't live without his word. And, this young master isn't one to break his promise. So, I'll keep my word. I won't give up my promise even if it's to a dead man. The 6th elder trembled in anger as he heard Da Xiao's mockery. He struggled to breathe, and then pounced forward with a loud shout. Jun Moxie sneered. Xiao Fengwu screamed like a pig being slaughtered. His left shoulder had been crushed by Jun Moxie. No, don't kill me. Don't cut my scalp and pour mercury into it. I beg you. I beg you. Grandpa Jun. Ancestor Jun. Xiao Fengwu suddenly begged for mercy as he was in severe pain. The more he spoke, the more scared he became. Then, he started to wail loudly. Tears and snot streamed down his face. The 6th elder suddenly stopped. Then, he roared in anger, Jun Moxie, you're despicable. Jun Moxie laughed and said, despicable? You have the nerve to say that I'm despicable? Didn't you think that you were despicable when you slaughtered tens of thousands of innocent people? Didn't you think that you were despicable when you crippled the descendants of those loyal officials and generals? How come you're despicable when it's your family's turn to suffer? What I've done today is no better than your Xiao families. Xiao Fengwu's screams and wails were unceasing amidst Jun Moxie's laughter. The sound of bones breaking resounded unceasingly. One by one, Xiao Fengwu's limbs were broken. They hung limply on the ground. The 6th elder roared, and rushed forward in a crazed manner. Jun Mo Xia looked at the 6th elder. Then, he grabbed Xiao Fengwu by the nape of his neck, and threw him towards the 6th elder. A snapping sound was heard as Xiao Fengwu's neck snapped. Jun Moxie's body followed behind Xiao Fengwu's body, and fiercely dashed forward. He was like a gust of wind and lightning. The sixth elder was startled. He was about to rush over, but Xiao Fengwu's body was about to hit him head-on. The sixth elder reached out his hand to catch Xiao Fengwu's body. But, he heard a whistling sound as Jun Imo Xia caught up to him. The sixth elder had seen Jun Moxie's fight with Xiao Buyu. So, how could he not know that Jun Moxie's agility was like that of a ghost? Moreover, his own strength was far weaker than usual. So, he didn't dare to be careless. So, he made a prompt decision not to catch Xiao Fengwu's body. Instead, he dodged to the left and drew his sword. Then, snowflakes suddenly appeared in the sky as he swung it. He had just unsheathed his long sword, and was about to unleash the Silver City's absolute sword when he suddenly heard a bang sound. Then, a kacha sound was heard. He saw Xiao Fengwu's body turn around and fly towards him. Jun Imo Xia had kicked Xiao Fengwu's body in the middle of his advance, and had changed his direction to fly towards the sixth elder. Apart from the fact that the direction of the kick was just right, the kick had also landed squarely on Xiao Fengwu's waist. This had completely shattered Xiao Fengwu's spine. Xiao Fengwu's face was still intact. But, he had already followed in Xiao Han's footsteps. He was thoroughly crippled, the sixth elder couldn't evade this attack. So, he knew that Xiao Fengwu would be the first to suffer if he were to forcefully attack with his sword. So, he hastily withdrew his attack, and held Xiao Fengwu in his arms. The sixth elder had noticed Xiao Fengwu's miserable condition as soon as he started to attack. So, he couldn't help but fly into a rage as he cried out in alarm, "Jun Moxie, you're very ruthless. You're very vicious." But, he was left dumbstruck by what he saw in front of him as soon as he said those words. Strongly recommending Dong Shui Wan Qing's new book, The Tale of the Fairies. Book number 17069774 Introduction, Myriad Great Daos Seek Immortality. Chapter 423. As an expert of Shenxian, the sixth elder had been fully prepared for Jun Moxie's subsequent attack. He had even prepared for it. Not only him, but everyone else had the same thought. Because attacking the sixth elder was the best choice that Jun Moxie could make at this moment. At the very least, he could escape unscathed. The eighth elder and the ninth elder stood far away and looked at the scene. Their hands were on the hilt of their swords, and they were also ready to step forward at any time. After witnessing Jun Moxie's unfathomable and extraordinary footwork, everyone present was deeply wary of him. Even the experts of Shenxian were no exception. Even the solitary eagle, who was also famous for his footwork, might not be able to win against Jun Moxie's footwork. The Sky Xian expert, who was supposed to be quite insignificant in the eyes of the Spirit Xian experts, had become more and more important to them at this moment. And, he had become an expert who was on the same level as them. They had to be on guard. Moreover, they had to be extremely careful and vigilant. However, at this moment, everyone's eyes clearly saw that Jun Moxie's body was sticking closely to Xiao Fengwu's back. Moreover, the sword in his hand was still flashing with a frightening cold light. The other Jun Moxie had suddenly appeared behind the eighth elder and the ninth elder. The corner of his mouth hung a dull but cruel smile, and a cold light flashed. Divine sword. Blood of yellow flame. A quiet and bright sword light had suddenly and unexpectedly streaked across the legs of the eighth elder and the ninth elder. It was like a lightning bolt that shook the heaven and earth, and disappeared in a flash. The brilliance of this sword light made everyone present feel as if they were facing an irresistible strong light, and they couldn't help but close their eyes. But, it left a brilliant radiance in the entire world. The lightning had long since disappeared, but in the hearts of those who had closed their eyes because of its brilliance, the peerless sharpness of this lightning sword light lingered for a long time. Then, Jun Moxie stood up like a crane soaring through the nine heavens, a dragon soaring into the sky. Disappearing in a flash, no one knew where he had gone to. The eighth elder and the ninth elder felt a chill in their hearts. They had a vague feeling that something bad had happened, on the other side, the young lady in white also raised her head in puzzlement. She pondered for a moment because even with her cultivation, she couldn't detect where Jun Moxie went after releasing the sword light. It was as if he had suddenly disappeared from the world. There was no trace at all, not even his spiritual consciousness. What was going on? He once again used this extremely profound movement technique, but I still couldn't grasp any information from it. This was no longer like a Xian skill of the human world. It was simply an immortal skill or a divine skill. The sixth elder was holding Xiao Fengwu with one hand when he suddenly froze. A long while passed before he tremblingly called out, "Eighth elder, ninth elder. Are you all right?" He had clearly seen that Jun Moxie's sword light had bypassed their lower bodies. So, why hadn't they reacted to it? What's going on? The sixth elder didn't believe that Jun Moxie had suddenly made such a scene to put on a show. He must have had his reasons. But, why do the eighth and ninth elders look fine? Nothing seems to have happened to them. The eighth elder and the ninth elder blankly looked at each other. Both of them had reached Shen Xian's level, but their cultivation was a level lower than the sixth elder's. Therefore, the sixth elder had recovered a lot and could barely fight back. But, the two of them were still in a weak state. They checked each other's bodies, and confirmed that there was nothing wrong with them. Then, they laughed and said, "Of course we're all right. That little bastard Jun Moxie is just a mere Tian Xian Jr. What could possibly happen to him with his petty tricks and bluff?" But, the two of them hadn't finished their sentence when their faces suddenly changed. A section of fluttering white robe fell from their thighs, and revealed a pair of long legs. They stood upright in the wind. The cold wind blew, and they felt a bone-piercing chill. The lower half of the robe and the upper half of the robe were obviously one. So, why did it fall? Could it be that it was cut off by someone? Just as they were thinking about this, they suddenly felt a heart-wrenching pain in their legs. The two of them looked at each other in horror, and moved their bodies at the same time. They didn't dare to take a step forward in disbelief. Their bodies had only moved a little when they suddenly fell down like a golden mountain or a jade pillar. Half of their bodies fell down. Fresh blood spurted out like 4 pillars of blood. Their tragic screams tore through the night sky, and their voices could be heard from miles away. Where the two of them were originally standing, for smooth legs, from the calves to the thighs, stood perfectly straight, like a towering mountain, towering and unmoving. Only the upper part of the legs was gurgling with blood foam. Jun Mosie's sword light flashed, and he had actually chopped off 2 people's legs. Because his speed had reached an indescribable level, and the blood of yellow flame's sharpness had reached an unprecedented level, the two of them actually didn't notice that their legs had been cut off for such a long time. Perhaps they had noticed it, but the two of them didn't dare to believe it. The surroundings fell into a deathly silence once again. No one could have imagined that there was actually someone in this world who was fast to such an extent. There was actually such a sword, and it was sharp to such an extent. The white-robed girl at the side sighed lightly. Her voice was so soft that no one could hear it. She was the only one who had seen Jun Moxie's sword clearly. There wasn't much ingenuity in that sword, and it didn't even have any technique to speak of. The only requirement was to be fast. A little faster, until the speed reached the limit. The movement technique and the speed of the sword worked closely together, once again raising the speed to the peak of perfection. Then, he slashed out with that sword. Of all the techniques in the world, there was nothing it couldn't overcome, but speed was unbreakable. When speed reached the limit, everything else would be destroyed. Jun Moxie, this newbie Xian practitioner who had just entered the Tian Xian realm and not even 2 days ago, actually managed to heavily injure and cripple 2 Shen Xian experts in front of everyone's eyes. Although these 2 Shen Xian experts had already exhausted all their strength because of the sudden change, whether it was their Xian Qi or their mental strength, they had all suffered from extreme pressure. Out of their full strength, they were only left with 15% at most, but they were still Shen Xian experts. Jun Moxie was actually able to injure them so severely that they didn't even know they were injured. Those two legs had clearly been cut off, but they were still able to temporarily join together with the body, and not even a single drop of blood had spilled out. Regardless of the speed of his movement technique, sword technique, or the sharpness of his sword, they had all reached a terrifying level. Eighth brother. Ninth brother, the sixth elder roared. Suddenly, blood spilled out of his eyes due to extreme grief and indignation. He roared, and Xiao Fengwu fell to the ground. The sixth elder stood there in a daze, and his whole body trembled. The Silver City had dispatched an unprecedentedly powerful lineup for this expedition. Xiao Buyu was the strongest person under the Great Master level, and had personally led the troops. 4 of the Xiao family's elders had been dispatched, and 2 of the Han family's elders had also been dispatched. So, a total of 6 Shenxian experts had been dispatched at the same time. Moreover, the 7 swords of the Silver City could rival the 7 great swords of the Great Masters if they joined hands. Moreover, the 2 Tianxian experts, Xiao Han and Mu Shuetong, such a force would have caused a sensation wherever they went. Who wouldn't dare to look them in the eye? However, such a formidable force had inexplicably suffered repeated blows. In fact, they had even suffered a devastating blow before they could retreat. The Xiao family's entire army had been annihilated. And, the cause of this was Xiao Han's challenge to Jun Wui. It was a trivial matter. Everyone had thought that the solitary eagle of the Jun family couldn't be underestimated. But, they had 6 Shenxian experts and the 7 swords. So, they were much stronger than solitary eagle. Even if Jun Wui had spared no expense to employ the tactic of numbers, they would have still been able to escape if they wanted to. How could a group of ordinary soldiers match Shenxian's speed? However, they hadn't expected that Xiao Han and his nephew would be crippled after this battle. Xiao Buyu would explode out of shame and indignation. Moreover, Jun Moxie had exposed the Xiao family's most despicable and shameless side. They had lost all standing and reputation. Only the 6th elder was left. It could be said that he was besieged on all sides. The Jun family wasn't the only one who wanted to deal with him. Even his own companions wanted to deal with him. I hate this. Why did a mysterious and powerful person appear at this critical juncture? And, why did he imprison all 5 of us? How could the Jun family be a match for the 5 elders of Shenxian and Xiao Buyu if that wasn't the case? The 6th elder looked around in grief and indignation. He saw countless pairs of eyes glaring at him like a tiger watching its prey. Then, he sighed, and suddenly thrust his sword into Xiao Fengwu's throat. I would rather lose my life than accept this endless humiliation. There's no hope for us today. So, I'll only face a greater tragedy if I try to hold on. I won't have the opportunity to escape. My 2 brothers' legs have been broken. So, they can't be any more crippled. The only thing I can do is to give them a quick death. Then, I'll commit suicide, and everyone else will die together. Ancestor, this child is incompetent. The 6th elder looked up to the sky, and cried bitterly. His eyes were streaming with tears as he condensed a sword light from his sword. Then, he hacked at the 8th and 9th elders on the ground. However, he was in a trance. So, he didn't even notice that Jun Moxie had appeared behind him. The 6th elder's chest flashed with a puff sound. Then, the tip of the sword disappeared, and an arrow of blood sprayed out. That sword had destroyed the 6th elder's bodily functions in an instant. The 6th elder's eyes bulged out as he tried to stand up. But the sword light hadn't even reached halfway when it scattered. Then, it fell to the ground with a clanged sound. His body swayed twice, and the light in his eyes dimmed and scattered. Then, he fell to the ground, and twitched twice. Clang! The divine sword returned to its scabbard, and issued a clear sound of satisfaction. It seemed as if it had eaten its fill in this first battle. The blood of 4 Shenxians and 1 Tianxians. The blood of 5 despicable villains was the first sacrifice for the divine sword, blood of yellow flame. Such a result was astounding. It was hard to believe. In fact, it was hard to believe even though they had witnessed it with their own eyes. Jun Moxie stood calmly. He looked at the two elders and the 7 swordsmen from the Silver Blizzard City. His face was expressionless as he slowly said, "Today's matter was a personal grudge between the Shao and Jun families. But, the grudge has been settled. Does anyone have anything else to say?" I'm afraid that the Silver City's future will be bleak if this continues. However, I'm a kind-hearted person. I won't take things too far. Jun Moxie's voice changed again. He heaved a long sigh and said, as the saying goes, who wouldn't be stabbed in the martial world? It wasn't easy for everyone. As the ancients said, let go when you have to, and forgive when you can. Saving a life is better than building a 7-storied pagoda. Lay down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha immediately. Amitabha. But, you've pushed me too far. So, there's no need to endure anymore. Good, good, good. The 7 swords of the Silver City weren't the only ones whose eyebrows twitched as soon as these words were spoken. Even the solitary eagle and the soldiers who were watching the battle were left dumbstruck. It was hard to imagine that there could be such a thick-skinned person in this world. You still have the nerve to say that you're a kind-hearted person? You won't take things too far. Forgive when you can. Why didn't you cut off your tongue when you said these words in such a strong wind? That's not all. But, you didn't even bat an eyelid when you said these words. Your heartbeat didn't even accelerate. This level of shamelessness is really amazing. How can we not be convinced? The hatred between the Shao family and my Jun family is higher than the sky, and deeper than the sea. But, I'm a kind-hearted person who doesn't wish to be stained with blood even though there's such a huge hatred between us. I mean, didn't I spare the culprit Shao Han's life? Everyone has seen this with their own eyes. So, you should know that I'm not lying. You're not lying. But, it's better to kill him than to do this good deed. Those murderous villains are like pure virgins when compared to a good person like you. The 7 swords felt their teeth turn sour, and their stomachs twitch. You see, I wouldn't have killed the 6th elder if I hadn't saved the 8th and 9th elders' lives. And, the 2nd master Xiao Buyu had committed suicide. So, I had invited him to dance for entertainment, and for everyone to have some fun. Moreover, he had also exercised his body. It was the best of both worlds. You see, he's already so old. So, how could he not be magnanimous? That's right. Xiao Fengwu was also killed by the 6th elder. I had kindly delivered him to the 6th elder's hands because I thought that they were family. But, I hadn't expected that the 6th elder would find his own grandson displeasing to the eye. So, he killed him as soon as he was delivered. That was a very quick and decisive move. I didn't have the time to rescue him. So, I'm very ashamed. Everyone knows that I'm a good person. But, I'm too soft-hearted. I bear all my problems by myself. I'm afraid of hurting the lives of ants when I sweep the floor, and I cherish the lives of moths. But, you must know that life is made of flesh and blood. It's not easy to grow up, blurg. Solitary Eagle turned around and vomited. The surrounding soldiers followed suit, and vomited all over the ground. This is too shameless. Too disgusting. Too outrageous. Such a shameless person is rarely seen in the world. Now, I'm begging you to take the 3 of them back to the Silver City. That shouldn't be a problem, right? In any case, you guys are going the same way. Who knows, you might be able to find out more. Jun Xia turned a blind eye to everyone's vomiting. His face was full of smiles, and he said in an unusually friendly manner, "This is human life, ah." The Silver City's 7 swords and the 3rd elder's 5th elder quickly left with Xiao Han and the other 2 crippled men after Jun Moxie had finished speaking. It was a great blessing to be able to leave this little demon's side as soon as possible. This is too disgusting. Mu Shuetong cupped his hands in obeisance towards Jun Wui before he left. He wanted to say something, but he didn't. It was worth mentioning that the little princess, Han Yen Meng, couldn't wait to run away. She had looked at Jun Moxie as if she was looking at a demon before she left. She was afraid that this demon would devour her skin and bones if she stayed any longer. Xia. Jun Wui's eyes turned red as he grabbed Jun Moxie's hand. He looked emotional. What you're saying, is it true? What is true? Jun Moxie was somewhat puzzled. It's about those kids from the Hall of Hell. Are you, really their descendants? Are you the descendants of my brothers? Jun Wui's eyes flickered with tears as he spoke in a hoarse voice. The first thing this blood general thought of when he got his revenge was his brother's descendant. He was hoping that Jun Moxie would tell him that the answer was no. Jun Wui didn't know how he would face such a cruel matter if it was true. I'm not lying. Most of it should be true. Jun Moxie understood. His expression became heavy as he said, "Third uncle, please be at ease. I've reinvestigated and resettled them after I've found out about this. Currently, their lives are much better. Moreover, I have already arranged for people to help them recover. Some of them have already recovered. Apart from that, I have also asked my master to concoct some miraculous medicine that can help them recover." Jun Moxie had no choice but to raise the flag in order to reassure Jun Wui. Jun Wui had always been a sentimental person. If this matter couldn't be handled properly, then he would feel sad when he saw these orphans again, even if he reunited with Han Yenyao in the future. In fact, this matter might even become a huge gap between Jun Wui and Han Yenyao. Both of them would be deeply in love with each other. But they would regret it for the rest of their lives. Such a matter wasn't impossible with Jun Wui's character. In fact, it was highly possible. The situation had gradually become clear. Chapter 425. Today's second update has arrived. I'm dizzy. I've only written 1,000 more words. I'm going to sleep. Tomorrow will be the fourth watch in the afternoon. The Silver Blizzard City's people had all left, and this matter had come to an end. Jun Wui had originally been in a good mood after beating his enemy. But then, he unexpectedly found out about a hidden secret that was difficult to accept. And, his originally lively heart seemed to have been shrouded in a layer of lingering haze. However, the third master was still the commander of the army. He adjusted his mood, and returned to the army to take command. After all, the army had been thrown into disorder because of the battle. So, the army had to be readjusted as soon as possible. Solitary Eagle and Dashao didn't immediately return to the army. Solitary Eagle had challenged the 7 swords of the Silver City by himself. And, he had borrowed the strength of the 7 swords to perfect his soaring eagle technique. That battle had been very beneficial to Solitary Eagle since he had been crazily obsessed with martial arts. He had suffered a small loss when he had faced the combined attack of the 7 swords and Xiaobuyu. But the overall benefits still outweighed the disadvantages. Solitary Eagle had always done things his own way. So, he simply sat down to meditate since everything was over. He adjusted his breathing, and digested what he had gained from the battle. Dashao was the same. Dashao had only been in this world for about half a year. He had fought many times before, but they couldn't be considered as real battles. Only the battle with Xiaobuyu could be considered as a real life or death battle. That battle had seemed simple. But, it had great significance for Jun Moxie. The Xian techniques of his previous life had almost merged into one in that battle. Solitary Eagle sat down to digest what he had gained. And, the army also needed some time to readjust. Dashao also sat down to accompany them for a while. Not much time had passed since a messenger had informed them that it was getting late. So, they had to set up camp. Dashao and Solitary Eagle's readjustment had also come to an end. Please wait a moment. You're leaving. What are we going to do? June Moxie and Solitary Eagle had just gotten up and were about to return when they heard a delicate and timid voice. The two of them turned around in astonishment. Only then did they remember that there were two other women in the tea house where the Silver City was located. When they first arrived, they seemed to be in some sort of dispute with the Shao family. Hearing the voice, the young master, Senior Eagle, and Senior Eagle were both taken aback. A green-clothed young girl was standing not far away from the two of them. Her small hands were twisting the hem of her clothes with all her might. Her tanned little face was not beautiful at all. Only her pair of big bright eyes were rather moving. But other than that, she was just like a mountain girl from the countryside. Moreover, she was the kind of little girl that was somewhat ugly. June Moxie felt that he had never seen this woman before, but for some reason, he felt a sense of familiarity in his heart. As an outstanding assassin and the king of assassins, June Moxie would never let go of any doubts. He immediately thought about it. Finally, with a flash of inspiration, the green-clothed figure of the Qian Sun Serpent Queen flashed past his heart. For some reason, the figure of the Snake King actually faintly overlapped with the young girl in front of him. But, wasn't this too unimaginable? At the same time, Solitary Eagle also thought of the Snake King. The two of them could not help but look at each other. They could both see the meaning in each other's eyes. Impossible. He had seen the Snake King in the Tianfa forest the last time. She was also dressed in green, and her figure was slim. However, her face was extremely beautiful. Moreover, the Snake King's every movement was filled with the aura of an impeccable powerhouse. Even a casual glance from her contained the aura of a king who looked down on all living things. In fact, that was the demeanor of a supreme powerhouse in the eyes of humans. But, how could this mountain girl in front of them compare? Who are you people? Why are you here? June Moxie looked at her suspiciously. He had already rejected the idea that the person in front of him was the Qian Sun Serpent Queen. But, he still couldn't let go of the fact that these two girls had appeared alone in this place. My elder sister and I are from Tianxiang. We had come with our family's guards to purchase medicinal ingredients. But, we didn't expect that we would encounter many wild beasts a few days ago. And, the guards and us were separated. The green-clothed girl said in a delicate and pitiful manner, my elder sister and I finally escaped with our lives after much difficulty. But, we encountered those hateful people. They wanted to take us back to be their wives. We couldn't even come to an agreement with them. So, they wanted to rob us openly. They were so vicious. The green-clothed girl's voice was as sorrowful as ever. But, June Moxie could hear a trace of a strange tone in her voice. It seemed as if she was somewhat amused, or disdainful. Just now, at the most critical moment, you guys came. Thanks to you guys coming, you even managed to chase away all the evildoers. You guys are the saviors of us sisters. The green-clothed girl's voice was full of emotion. She narrated the story of a lone girl who met a strong man on the road. Then, a young hero appeared to save the beauty. You're saying that the Shao family's brat wanted to take you back to be his wife? June Moxie was somewhat stunned as he looked at the green-clothed girl's dark face. He coughed twice and said, the Shao family's, this eyesight is truly different from the masses. It's extraordinary, it's not me. It's my elder sister, my elder sister. The green-clothed girl was ashamed and angry at the same time. In fact, she almost used her Xian technique. She didn't want to hide her identity anymore. She wanted to kill this hateful guy. Even if she didn't kill him, she wanted to teach him a good lesson. Oh, no wonder. He. I was just saying that the descendants of the Shao family had never seen a beautiful woman. But, they wouldn't be so hungry that they couldn't be choosy. What I meant to say was that you aren't that ugly. June Moxie smiled in relief. The Snake King's delicate body trembled in anger when she heard Dashao's words. This explanation is more infuriating than no explanation at all. This brat's reputation as the #1 debauchee of Tianxiang isn't undeserved. No wonder my elder sister doesn't like him. I had thought that this guy was a man of affection and righteousness. And I had a good impression of him. But I saw that he was judging a book by its cover. So, I couldn't help but sweep away the previous admiration I had for him. In fact, I nearly crushed my teeth from gritting them. The Beast King of this generation had been angered to the point of tears. Jun Moxie secretly observed the situation. And he felt relieved in his heart. The Snake King would have either fought me or wouldn't have cared about my impudent debauchee. But she wouldn't have shed tears. This is the normal behavior of an ordinary girl. However, he didn't know that the Snake King was the Beast King of this generation. But she hadn't been able to take human form for more than 20 years. And she had started to behave like a human after she had taken human form. She might have possessed intelligence before, but there was still a big gap between her and an ordinary human being. The Snake King's temperament was no more than that of an 18 or 19-year-old girl. So, her endurance might not be comparable to that of a girl of the same age when she couldn't display her strength at will. This was the fundamental difference between a level 9 Xian beast and a Beast King. That was why some level 9 Xian beasts could only be beasts, and some level 9 Xian beasts could become Beast Kings. As long as it was a woman, which one of them didn't cherish their appearance? Although the Snake King knew that her current appearance was a disguise, she still felt extremely wronged in her heart. Most men would have the same thought. That is, they would be able to gain the favor and love of a rich family's daughter or even a princess. And it was the same for all women. Even if they didn't dress up well, they would always hope that a man would discover their inner beauty. They wouldn't fall in love with them because of their beautiful appearance. Rich men would always hope that women would get close to them and like them, but not for money. Beautiful women would always hope that men would get close to them, but not because of their beauty. They would always think that this was true love. Oh, I'm getting off topic. While everyone was talking, the girl in white who had been sitting up all this time finally stood up and slowly walked over. Even with Solitary Eagle's mental fortitude, he couldn't help but be dazzled by the girl's peerless elegance. It was like the bright moon in the sky had suddenly descended upon the world. Solitary Eagle stared blankly for a while before turning to look at Jun Moxie. He thought that this young man's experience was shallow. How could he have seen such a beautiful girl before? He might even make a fool of himself. At the very least, he would be dumbfounded. It wouldn't be surprising if he were to salivate. Even a descendant of the Silver Blizzard City's Shao family had thoughts of snatching the bride. One could only imagine how beautiful this girl was. If one had to compare, then Guan Qinghan was undoubtedly a national beauty. But this girl was a peerless beauty. Du Xiaoyi was pure and adorable. But this girl was a peerless beauty. There was only one person in the world. There were no two colors in the sky. This white-clothed young lady was completely worthy of such words. This was completely out of Solitary Eagle's expectations. Because Jun Moxie's face was calm at this moment. It was as if he didn't see this rare beauty. In his eyes, it was as if he was looking at an ordinary person. He was completely indifferent. This was definitely not an act. Because if he deliberately put on an act, he would never reveal such a natural expression. This kid is really a freak. Seeing such a beautiful girl, even this old man's eyes almost popped out. But he didn't even bat an eyelid. Could it be that the previous event was too intense, and now he can't take it anymore? Solitary Eagle muttered to himself. Jun Moxie wasn't completely indifferent. It was just that although this girl came over to thank him, Jun Moxie didn't feel the slightest bit of thank you. Instead, he felt a bone-chilling cold. This girl in white was extremely beautiful. But, for some reason, there was an inexplicable hostility coming from her. Although she had tried her best to hide it, how could Jun Moxie, who had experienced ambushes from all sides for 2 lifetimes, not be able to sense it? This kind of feeling, it was as if he had severely offended her in the past. Could it be that my enemies from my previous life have also crossed over? That's impossible, right? Even if they crossed over, no one would know that I am June Moxie. June Dashao was somewhat puzzled. Mrs. Heavenly Beauty is really amazing. But, what is your name? Why have you come here? June Moxie searched around, and didn't find the slightest bit of Xian Qi fluctuation on these two sisters. So, he skillfully asked this question. This question had already been answered by the girl in green. Now, June Moxie deliberately repeated it. He wanted to see if these two girls would make such a low-level mistake. This girl's surname is Mei Xuan. That is my younger sister, Mei Chen. This foolish sister thanks young Master June for your help. The girl in white blushed as she replied softly. I was just coincidentally able to settle some grudges with the Shao family of Blizzard Silver City. I didn't deliberately help you. Miss, you don't have to be so polite. A good name. Mei Xuan. Not bad, not bad. Plum blossoms in the snow like smoke. Only a peerless beauty like Miss is worthy of such a beautiful name. Your younger sister's name is also very good. Mei Chen, no money. June Moxie opened his eyes, and blurted out these words. No money. The Snake King's face turned black. He wished he could bite the debauchee June, and let him know that not everyone can be played with. It doesn't matter whether young Master June had the intention or not. But the fact is that you have indeed saved us sisters, the girl in white said in a gentle voice. She didn't respond to June Moxie's no money. Miss is too polite. How does Miss know my surname? Dashao asked. That group of villains had revealed the young master's name. We sisters are also people of Tianxiang. So, we naturally know the young master's identity, the girl in white replied as if nothing had happened. You are also people of Tianxiang. It turns out that you are from the same hometown. Miss Mei, we are really brought together by fate. Dashao stared blankly for a moment. But, his tone became even more familiar. The girl in white curled her lips in a secretive manner. Brought together by fate? This old woman and you are truly brought together by fate. Fate will make you regret it for the rest of your life. Next, the girl in white, Mei Xuan, made a request. She wished to accompany the army back to Tianxiang City. June Moxie's eyes turned, and he agreed. He certainly didn't covet her. For Dashao, a woman's beauty would only last for a few years. Her figure was good, and her face was passable. After all, who would be interested in looking at her face when the lights went out at night? However, this girl in white's unique beauty could strike a blow at Guanqing Han. So, it would be a good idea. If I can arouse Guanqing Han's sense of crisis because of this, and make it possible for me to make it a second time, how wonderful would that be? It doesn't matter whether these two girls have ulterior motives or not. They don't even have the slightest bit of Xian Qi. So, what can they possibly do? He looked at Solitary Eagle. Solitary Eagle pondered for a moment. Then, he nodded in a certain manner. June Moxie felt reassured in his heart. It would be excusable if there were strong people in this world who couldn't see through my disguise. But, wouldn't it be too outrageous if even a great master like Solitary Eagle couldn't see through my disguise? One would need to be ranked in the top 4 of the 8 great masters in order to hide from Solitary Eagle. Perhaps, one would need to be ranked even higher. After all, not everyone has the terrifying strength of Venerable Mei. Besides, these two little girls don't even look 20 years old. So, if they turn out to be great masters, then I'll eat that old solitary falcon alive. I'll eat him alive if that's the case. Therefore, the two sisters, Mei Xuan and Mei Chen, were comfortably invited into the carriage by June Moxie. Chapter 426. In the silence of the night, Dugu Xiaoyi's shout made June Imo Xia, who wasn't far away, shiver. He draped a long robe over his shoulders, and rushed over to investigate. He asked, and found out that Dugu Xiaoyi's pet, Little White, had been missing ever since she had arrived in Tianfa. But, it had mysteriously returned in the middle of the night. It must be known that it had taken them more than 10 days to travel to the Tianfa forest at this moment. Dugu Xiaoyi was naturally overjoyed by this unexpected turn of events. Guan and Dugu finally had the leisure to look at Jun Moxie after they had heard this. Jun Dashao had come in wearing a long robe. His 2 fair thighs were very eye-catching, and had caused the 2 women to cry out in surprise. Their cries contained 30% surprise, 40% jealousy, and 30% unsure of what to say. Dashao's body could be said to be perfect after he had transformed from the Hongjun Pagoda. His body's toughness and proportions had reached the level of Mr. So-and-so. He wouldn't even need to reveal his face if he were to be placed on Earth. His body would be enough to charm thousands of women. However, there was always one place that was too perfect, or perhaps it could be said that the only place that the young master was dissatisfied with was that his skin was too white. Although it wasn't the kind of sickly white but a very healthy color, it was still to the point where his skin was sparkling and translucent like snow. This point alone was enough to make Guan Qinghan and Dugu Xiaoyi, and the other beauties to feel jealousy. Little girl Dugu was relatively insensitive. She had asked the young master at least 10 times over the past few days what he had used to achieve such smooth, tender, and white skin. This had made the young master extremely gloomy. A grown man like him has skin that makes even beautiful women sigh in admiration. I don't know if I should be happy or depressed. Dashao had been accustomed to level 1 sleep when he had heard the little girl's cries. So, he had hurriedly rushed in after putting on his robe. The upper half of his body was fine. However, the lower half of his body wasn't in a state of decoration. The 2 women had been anxious to answer Dashao's questions. So, how could they not cry out in surprise now that they had calmed down? There were 4 women in this room. So, why were there only 2 cries? That was because only Miss Guan and the little girl had cried out in surprise. The other 2 girls, Mei Xuyan and Mei Qian, didn't even bat an eyelid in the slightest. However, Little White was much more well-behaved than before. It used to pounce on Jun Dashao as soon as it saw him. But, it didn't dare to carelessly go up to him anymore. Instead, it practiced diligently. It would practice its claws in front of the 4 women when it had nothing to do. In fact, it seemed as if it was putting on a show. But, it didn't know who it was putting on a show for. Dugu Xiaoyi was a mischievous little girl. So, she started to shout. This little guy has finally become sensible. It's time for me to find a wife. The little girl had finished teasing her Xian beast. But, she hadn't had the time to let out a sigh. It was obvious that her unintentional words had touched her heart. Then, Guan Qinghan also sighed. It was unknown whether this had triggered a chain reaction. The green-clothed girl, Qian Sun Serpent Queen, also sighed. Only the white-clothed girl, Mei Xuyan, didn't sigh. But, she faintly coughed. They continued their journey the next day. However, their journey had sped up a lot. Jun Moxie had been suspicious about Little White's return this time. But, he had thought that the Xian Beast Kings of Tianfa had specially sent Little White back. This kind of thing was too ridiculous. So, he had dismissed it with a smile. Perhaps Little White and Dugu Xiaoyi have some kind of telepathy. Moreover, this kind of Xian Beast's tracking ability is frighteningly strong. So, it's not surprising at all. Jun Moxie would go over to provoke Mei Xuyan on the way. He wanted to use this opportunity to provoke Guan Qinghan. Humph. You're ignoring me, aren't you? Look, I'm not any worse than you, right? So, hurry up and come. I'll be waiting for you in my bed. We'll cross the Phoenix and become a dragon. The spring breeze will come again at the Jade Gate. We'll have sex on Mount Wu. Anyway, hurry up. However, Mei Xuyan's reaction had made Jun Moxie understand the meaning of, there's always someone better than you. There's always a mountain higher than you. Miss Guan is cold enough. But, she doesn't know that there's always an iceberg above the iceberg. Mei Shuiyan is cold and indifferent. She frowns after a few sentences. Then, she becomes impatient and orders him to leave. She's even colder than Guan Qinghan. Miss Guan would at most ignore you with a cold face. But, Mei Shuiyan would drive him away. Her attitude was as strict as the law. She would obey every order. She was more like an empress than an empress. Da Xiao's plan had been ruined by Mei Shuiyan. But, it hadn't been completely fruitless. One day, Guan Qinghan finally relented. She secretly told Jun Moxie that she wanted him to wait in the tent at night. She had something to say. Jun Moxie suddenly felt a burst of heat in his lower abdomen. Hard work pays off. Isn't this the case? It seems that this girl has some sense of crisis. She knows how to consolidate her position. Jun Daxiao found a place in the afternoon. He washed himself until he smelled good. Then, he put on a snow-white robe. It was soft and soft. It could reflect the elegance of a young man. In other words, it was the best way to show off. The curtain of night had quietly fallen. A cold cough was heard outside the tent. Well, the iceberg is here. Jun Moxie smiled complacently in his heart. He was very reserved. He used a very manly and elegant voice. He said in an unusually calm and steady manner, "Please come in." The curtains were lifted, and Jun Imosie's smiling face turned into a bitter melon. The person who had come in was Guan Qinghan. But, the problem was that there was another person behind Guan Qinghan. It was Duga Xiaoyi. Duga Xiaoyi was also holding Little White in her arms. Jun Moxie suddenly felt like a deflated ball. At this time, even if he used his toes to think, he would definitely know that Guan Qinghan's arrival wasn't what he had expected. This made Jun Daxiao, who was burning with passion and lust, very disappointed. It was like a big basin of snow water had been poured into his leather collar on a cold day. He felt cold from the top of his head to the back of his heel. "This time, we came to you for a serious matter. I had a discussion with Sister Xiaoyi. After getting along with you these days, we felt that the two girls you saved were not simple. Moreover, almost none of what they said was true. But, why did they insist on joining our team? I'm afraid they have ulterior motives. How could you be so careless this time?" Guan Qinghan's cold eyes stared at him. She said, "Don't you know that it's a troubled time to take in two girls of unknown origin? Why do you say that?" Jun Moxie secretly rolled his eyes. "Of course, I also know that these two girls have some unknown origin. But, it's not as serious as you say, right? Don't look at that Mei Shuiyan's arrogance. Maybe she's just trying to be diligent and play hard to get brother's attention. Maybe she's trying to get brother's attention. Emos, yeah, I know that you've had a smooth journey recently. You've even defeated many experts from the Xiao family. You've been in the limelight recently. You can say that you're flushed with success. But, people can be arrogant, but they can't be too arrogant. Didn't you notice the flaws in the way those two girls talked?" Guan Qinghan frowned and said, "Flaws? I also know that their words aren't true. But, I haven't found any specific flaws. Sister, please enlighten me." Daxiao approached her with a calm face. "They claim to be from Tianxiang City. Moreover, they're the descendants of a drug dealer. Moreover, they know who you are. But, they still took the initiative to come with you. This is a big flaw." Guan Qinghan snorted. "Eh? How is this a flaw? It's because they're also from Tianxiang City that they're willing to come with us. It's not strange that they know who I am. The Xiao family has already called me by my name many times. So, it would be strange if they didn't know who I am. They were in trouble with the Xiao family. So, I helped them out. Isn't that a chivalrous act?" Jun Daxiao asked in confusion. Guan Qinghan was speechless. She was silent for a while. Then, she finally said, Master Jun Sunshao, don't tell me you don't know what kind of reputation you have. How bad is it? If these two women were truly from the Tianxiang city, then they would have fled as far as they could the moment they heard Jun Imosie's name. How could they possibly have rushed over? And, they even took the initiative to come with us? Isn't this like sending sheep to the tiger's mouth? That's reasonable. I didn't think of this. What? Jun Moxie suddenly came to his senses. He pondered for a while. Then, he suddenly said, what do you mean? Is my image in Tianxiang City so unbearable? This sentence made the two girls burst into laughter. Brother Imosie certainly has a good image. But, it seems that I'm the only one in Tianxiang City who knows about it. Otherwise, Brother Imosie would have been cooked by someone else. Dugu Xiaoyi pestered him, and proudly hugged his arm. You're very clear about your image. Do you need me to explain it in detail? Besides, I'm very puzzled. Since when do you have an image? Guan Qinghan rolled her eyes at him and said, their previous lies are secondary. What I really mind is that they weren't being persecuted by the Silver Blizzard City's Shao family when we arrived. Both sides were in a standoff. Note that they were confronting each other. In other words, they were at least strong enough to resist the Silver Blizzard City. But the most surprising thing is that the white-clothed girl, Mei Shuyan, and Mei Qian didn't seem to be acting strangely. Do you mean that they should have been protected by a powerful expert? Jun Moxie frowned. That's right. But, you and the solitary eagle didn't discover the person protecting them. That's really strange. Guan Qinghan was a woman. So, she thought very comprehensively and meticulously. It's understandable if you couldn't discover it. But, even the solitary eagle, one of the 8 great masters, couldn't discover even the slightest trace of it. So, this is a big matter. What kind of formidable strength does this hidden expert have? Jun Moxie crossed his hands, and paced around the tent twice. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.